So hello and good morning to day number 4. It's the final day of the AAIC 2021. I'm Clemens Wasler from AI Austria, and with me here on the stage is
Matthias Grabner from Advantage Austria. Yeah, we had a 3-day program already. Now is day 4, a day which I'm really looking forward to because we have really saved up some highlights for you today. Because today we talk about what's next in AI. And that entails several interesting panels and presentations. Clemens?
So starting with investors, because putting the money where the puck will go. So obviously we ask investors for that. And so we're very happy to welcome a large investor round for our first panel. Later today, we will also have participants from the research side joining us. Mr. LSTM himself, Mr. Hochreiter, will give a talk shortly after lunchtime.
AI pioneer, Sepp Hochreiter.
Most cited AI paper in the world.
If you are in AI, you know him. And if you're not, we will repeat that once again, that he's really one of the highlights.
So without further hesitation, I would like to hand over the word to Retterath from Earlybird Ventures VC, who is hosting the venture capitalist and investor panel. So Andre, the stage is yours.
Good morning, Andre.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Clemens and Matthias, for handing over and also for giving us the chance to host this panel here. I'm super excited to also welcome my fellow panelists. We have a diverse field of panelists from Judith, Familia investing in the pre-seed and seed stages, Ben from Atomico investing Series A onwards, and Drew from Bessemer Venture Partners investing across stages. And most interestingly, most of the investors on the panel also invest across geographies. So I'm super excited to hear about their perspectives about investing in AI. For the next 45 minutes, we will cover the hottest trends in AI, why Europe might be ahead or behind in AI, and what investors are really looking for across stages and geographies when they invest in AI. To start with, I'd like to introduce myself briefly before handing over to the other panelists. So I'm Andre, I'm a principal at Earlybird Venture Capital. Earlybird is a pan-European venture firm with a 24-year history of investing in seed or Series A stage companies like UiPath, N26, Smava, Ivan, and many more. We currently invest from 4 different funds with a total volume of a bit more than 700 million. And we particularly like to invest in very tech-centric businesses. So I'm super excited about this panel specifically. Personally, I'm a mechatronics engineer, worked a bit more than 5 years in industry, working mainly on predictive maintenance before I left to study management and doing my PhD in the intersection between computer science and finance on the topic of machine learning in VC. And I joined Earlybird a bit more than 3 years ago and heading now our AI-focused investment practice. So enough about me, handing over to my fellow panelists. Judith, why don't you start with a quick intro?
Thank you so much, Andre. So my name is Judith. I'm a general partner at Familia. We are a Berlin-based early stage fund investing across Europe and the US. Our focus is finding the next best B2B focused disruptive companies that enable or disrupt large industries. A lot of that focus actually is on AI companies, and we've made a couple of fantastic investments across different countries in Europe and also the US. I first caught the bug of machine learning and big data back at university at the Internet Institute, and have been focused on finding the next best automation and disruptive company in that space ever since.
Cool, thank you. Ben, why don't you go next?
Thanks, Andre, and thank you very much for having me today. I'm Ben, I'm partner at Atomico. Atomico is a generalist venture fund based in London and really focused on helping to back and scale Europe's most ambitious and visionary entrepreneurs. We invest across Europe. We invest across stages, so anything from Series A and onwards. And we really look for companies doing all kinds of things, right from consumer internet through to kind of very deep and frontier technology. I am a partner on our early stage B2B team, so I look across B2B, but really have a kind of passion and interest for companies that are using hard technologies like AI, like machine learning, simulation, and other things to tackle big and thorny problems in traditional industries. And I think that if you look across the board, machine learning and AI are some of the most advanced and developed and powerful technologies for doing that today. Atomico has a kind of wide-ranging AI machine learning portfolio. So everything from semiconductors like graph core that are really powering this technology at scale, through to applications in healthcare and autonomous vehicles, in Industry 4.0 and many other areas as well. So it's a big theme we've been investing against for a number of years. And my own background was as a software engineer originally, and always exciting to see the technology from the kind of fundamentals, and then see it out in the wild and the opportunities it can create.
Thank you so much, Ben. Last but not least, Dhruv.
Hey, my name's Dhruv. I'm an investor at Bessemer Venture Partners. We're a global multi-stage firm, so we invest across the U.S., Europe, Israel, India, and China. And we typically focus on investing in early stage companies. So, seed, Series A, Series B is most of our focus, but we can also write larger checks. And I think we're very focused on software. In particular, I'm very focused on enterprise, SMB, vertical software. A lot of these like B2B software categories where for a while I think the focus was on just bringing a basic system of record to a lot of these industries and sort of the next generation of what we're seeing. So we call that kind of vertical software, vertical application software, or infrastructure software. But now we're even more excited about is that I think over the next decade, we're seeing just a lot of opportunity to build on top of those existing kind of software 1.0 systems and automate them. And that's where I think a lot of this AI technology is going to be really exciting. So I'm based in London, and we have a new office here. We're focused on investing, like I said, globally, but we do specifically spend a lot of our time looking at early stage, B2B focused companies in Europe as well. And our portfolio is pretty broad, but within AI, we've invested on the all the way on the hardware and chip side, companies like Habana Labs, more applied vertical companies like Shift Technologies in Paris, for example, in the insurance space, and several others. So look forward to diving in and learning more about it today.
Cool. Thank you so much, Dhruv. Let me quickly double click on one thing you said. So you said you're specifically looking into verticalized enterprise software. Can you contextualize that on AI specifically? So if you think about AI, horizontal platform technologies versus verticalized AI integrators, how do you think about that? And what are you specifically looking for in terms of AI, vertical versus horizontal?
Yeah, great question. I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts too. I think one of the reasons or ideas behind vertical versus horizontal for us has been that oftentimes it seems, it would seem like a verticalized data set is more robust to actually build some sort of a learning system on top of. So I think, for example, our company Shift Technology in the claims automation and insurance space, they focus so specifically on insurance claims that they have a lot of data in that category that I think that gives them kind of an advantage when they're building their their sort of systems for automation. I think it's possible too in other categories. Like there's companies that have done this on, like Gong, for example, is a company that I've admired, but we were not investors in. That's focused more on like a sales use case and seems to have really focused again on like a verticalized approach. And so it just sort of seems like we've seen that first kind of pop up. I don't think that's the only opportunity, but it just sort of, from what I've seen, like it seems like a very practical first use case of automation, because you have enough data to really actually build some sort of a feedback loop within the area you're working on. But would love to hear what other people have, if anyone else has specific thoughts on that too as well.
Yeah, happy to jump in. I would subscribe to everything that you've said. I think, also in our portfolio, we've invested into some companies like Cloud&C, that are using AI to basically automate CNC milling alongside Atomico, but also other companies that are more in kind of focused on document extraction, automation within insurance, similar to Shift. And I think very often it's easier within the enterprise context to offer deep value extraction when you are focused on a vertical, and when you really go down into that workflow and you try and capture more value as you grow the product. I think when you have a horizontal solution, the big challenge is you need a very, very strong technology foundation to start with, because you need to have, like a really, really strong model, lots and lots of data to be able to offer that horizontal value proposition. And then there's obviously always the question of, why couldn't any of the big platforms out there be eating into your market at some point? Why would this piece of cake be defensible against other, more horizontal players, especially in the cloud space, that are also trying to capture the more horizontal use cases? I think nonetheless, there is a lot of opportunity still left in that market. We've invested into a couple of companies from Impera that are, quite broad when it comes to document extraction across different verticals, or also Abacus AI. But I would say that all of those teams, had kind of, a super long track record in AI. They came with, kind of 20 machine learning engineers that they were able to hire. So I think it takes a certain kind of clout, and maybe not necessarily, the leanest approach when it really comes to go to market, which I think lends itself a lot more to the vertical use case, and thus also something that we tend to see more when it comes to the European early stage companies, where we just don't yet have, the big tradition of, tons and tons of ML engineers that have been working at the likes of Google and Facebook that can then spin out and, kind of try and come up with a competing offering in those sectors.
Maybe one slightly different take on what I agree with the others on the same kind of things. But if you look at horizontal AI businesses, I always find you're looking at a trade-off between simplicity and power. So if you're trying to take these very powerful technologies and provide them as a platform or as a product into business, either you're really dumbing them down for a kind of non-technical user or a kind of business line user, in which case you're sacrificing a lot of power or flexibility, or at the other end of that spectrum, you're basically providing the kind of the open source tools that are out there that are so fantastic, TensorFlow and other things, in some kind of hosted format, in which case the developers you're selling to are sophisticated enough, they might as well take and run and manage their own products in many cases. And there's good exceptions and things like Ivan to how people think about that. But that I more often than not, I've seen businesses that kind of fall in the wrong place on that spectrum, where you either lose too much or you're exposing too much. And so really, for horizontal AI businesses, I think it's much harder to figure out who is the user and who is the ideal customer for these. I think with vertical businesses, because you're selling to a business user and because you can combine power and simplicity through very well-defined use cases of that technology. I think you have less of those kind of challenges and questions to deal with.
Just to follow up on that, Ben. So you said sometimes they find themselves in the wrong positioning. If you think about positioning in terms of horizontal versus vertical, on the horizontal side, we obviously see more research heavy, more tech-centric businesses. And on the vertical side, we, on the other hand side, see more integrators, how I like to call it. They focus on specific industries. They need to understand the whole value chain within a specific industry. Now, this is a completely different characteristic set for different kind of companies. So I assume that's why you said they find themselves in the wrong positioning. Do you have a specific preference for either or, horizontal versus the vertical?
I wouldn't say I have a kind of preference. Personally, I spend more of my time looking at vertical and applied AI businesses. As a kind of, primarily as a software investor and looking at the size of problem that is left to solve in many enterprises in many industries, I like to see how these technologies can be applied and kind of used to kind of unlock value and justify spend on those technologies because of the value you're creating in it against an industry problem. But I think as an organization, as a team at Atomico and across the industry, I think there are still great horizontal businesses, whether you're talking about chips or the kind of enabling platforms of these other businesses. I think the great thing about building a vertical AI business now is you don't have to start implementing neural nets from kind of first principles. You've got all this infrastructure that other people have built to implement on. So there's, as with all these things, there's incredible value in being the pieces of the stack as well as the applications at the top.
And speaking about the differentiating factors, so oftentimes people say that in verticalized AI, you you see commercial traction earlier than you will see for the horizontal platforms, because these horizontal platforms are a bit more complex to put together. It's more research heavy until you productize that and really can generate the commercial traction. So how do you think about the importance of commercial traction when investing in AI-centric businesses more generally? You did at the earliest stages. How do you think about it?
I think it really depends on the type of company and the type of problem they're solving, right? I think, we've got companies that are trying to build, kind of the GPT-3 of Europe, and it's pretty clear that, they're not going to come with tons and tons of traction initially. When it comes, because that's a really bold vision, and that takes a lot of money and a lot of kind of work behind closed doors in order to get anything up and running that's going to be of high performance. And so I do think it's important that as venture capitalists we also back these types of businesses. And obviously traction is amazing, that's fantastic, that needs to be valued, and that's great, and that's, as you said, obviously easier in the vertical use cases. But I think at the same time, especially when it comes to European investors, there's been somewhat of a, you could say, malaise when it comes to not necessarily funding the more researchy, kind of long-term bets that I do think we need to be investing in. And so, I think, it's our mandate to, invest in both types of categories. And I do think there's been quite a shift in thinking over the last 5 years, when it comes to, funds also embracing the more kind of, fundamental businesses that might take a little bit longer to go to market, but that are equally important, and who will see the kind of value uptick just a little bit later in their life cycle, but then have a chance of exploding. And like the others, we've also invested in Grok, for example, just a US company in the AI chip space. I think these companies, there's a lot of work that goes into them, a lot of long hard hours, and you don't hear from them for too long, but then they come up with a fantastic new result with a fantastic new chip, and it was kind of all worth it. But I do think it needs investors that are able to kind of follow that vision and not kind of press companies on showing traction from day one, because I think that's what we certainly, I think, have enough of in Europe, and I'd rather like to see us having more of the fundamental tech bets as well.
Thank you, Judith. Dhruv, how do you think about it? Also investing across the stages, do you differentiate in terms of horizontal versus vertical? What traction is required so that Bessemer dives deeper?
Yeah, it's a big question. I don't know that I have like a good answer similar to everyone else on like horizontal versus vertical. I think when you're looking at horizontal, I always just ask, like, why can't Google do this? Why can't Amazon do this? Why can't Facebook do this? And usually those teams have like huge resources devoted to these problems. And so like what I'm really looking for is a good answer to that question is why has this team been able to figure out something with a small group of people that's going to be enduring and a competitive advantage to what Google's 500 ML engineers are working on across the world. And it's difficult. That's part of the reason it's challenging. But I think to Judith's point, like, we would probably rather take a bet in a really strong, fundamentally differentiated technology early, so maybe even before they have a product or before they have a lot of traction, and we'd like to make that bet. But if it's something that's more less differentiated, then we'd like to probably see a lot more revenue traction, because otherwise it's difficult for us to say. So I think, like, one example, maybe, like, again, to her point around like the sort of the chip infrastructure space, I think that's like a highly differentiated technology. And so like we made a seed, I believe it was a pre-product or seed investment in a company called Habana Labs, which is an AI chip company. And the bet was that they're actually designing something like fundamentally different from Intel and some of the other big chip manufacturers. And so we'd love to take bets like that. They're pretty rare though, and so we don't come across them that often. But I think otherwise, this question of like how are you different from what Google and Amazon and these big AI companies with huge teams are doing is like a key question for me always as I look at like the horizontal ones, which is less of a problem for the vertical ones, because they're owning a category that they can actually be better than say the Google or generic ML platform.
And I think
thank you.
in all transparency, it's also a problem that's getting harder, right? When it comes to like the marginal, improvements of AI, like those are getting more and more expensive. And so I think there is a real question to be asked of, if you're a pre-seed company, what's your unfair insight and what's your unfair advantage when it's not just, the pure kind of, brute cash force that you have, which, the big tech companies tend to have, but the early stage companies, do struggle with. And so I do think that's a relevant question that seed funds are struggling with when it comes to making investments in the horizontal, more research, longer term bets.
And let's dive a bit deeper into the fundamental disruptions, as you, Drew, said, and the hottest topics in AI. You spoke about GPT-3. I remember, Ben, you wrote a blog post in 2017 why AI is now on the menu at dinner. And you spoke about the hottest trends back then, and that it really surpassed the IoT wave, and that AI is now really a buzzword. So how do you think about the hottest trends within AI, and then really hype versus real fundamental disruption then?
That's some good kind of background reading. I think that the point I was making back then was really around exactly that. It was around this topic becoming such a hyped topic. There was, whether it was, Elon Musk or, others, there was, it was the kind of Bitcoiner today in terms of what people were kind of tweeting about and memeing about on Twitter. And I think, that the subtle subtext of that was that there was a lot of kind of fear being generated around the impact of AI. Every article, every sort of semi-serious article about AI had like a Terminator movie screenshot as the kind of the headline banner image on the article. And I think it was capturing the public's imagination, but it wasn't being very helpful in its conflation of kind of AI with these scary robots that change the world. I think now we are, encouragingly more and more past that, where you can read press coverage about AI, you can see these technologies covered in the media and on the news, and you can, get real cut through of the positive benefits, in healthcare, in construction and manufacturing, in these other big areas that people realize need to be improved because of the state of the economy, the state of world health. And so I think, I could probably say that we're past that hype phase and into the point now where, as we've all talked about, as more companies focus on vertical applications of these technologies in many wider areas, and the promise of the technology starts to really realize itself, because we're not just seeing these, the earlier stage companies with ideas, but we're really seeing some of these companies mature and kind of manifest and have these technologies displayed at kind of scale. I think you saw, I think maybe this is the Bessemer company, but Tractable, a European company that just announced this huge deal with Geico this week about processing claims with AI at massive scale. You start to see things like that, or within many of our own portfolio companies, company I work with, Automation Hero, that has many great customers doing large scale AI deployments now. The potential is realized, and so as a kind of headline trend about what's hot, I think really the AI and the space around AI has moved on from calling out these kind of hot ideas into maturing as a technology to the point where what's hot is really the impact and the applications we're seeing.
And just to become a bit more specific on that, so if I look at companies, like literally every company puts the AI tag on their pitch deck. Yeah, we're doing some kind of AI, even though it's very narrow AI, just very supervised, essentially just regressions. Yeah, so is this statistics, is this AI? So AI is very fuzzy buzzword. And within AI, you can have multiple definitions of machine learning versus AI, the cognitive areas, and so on. So if you would need to pick, like, let's say 2 or 3 of the hottest trends within the huge AI bucket, Ben, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I smile because we just invested in a company called Pactum in Estonia, and the CTO of Pactum was formerly head of computer vision at Starship, the small autonomous robot. So he has this kind of pure machine learning background of doing computer vision for these robots. And then at Pactum, he's very clear that he's building AI, but he's not, the fundamental technology is not all machine learning. There's a bunch of other techniques. So I think, what we're seeing is a diversification of techniques that you could call AI. And I think, the truth is that AI as a term is not strictly defined, right? It is, machine learning, let's say, is a set of specific techniques. And I think, someone touched on it, I think Judith touched on it before, but I think actually what's exciting with machine learning is that there are still, cutting edge research groups pushing the potential of machine learning and introducing new techniques at the edges that will improve machine learning over time. I think, we saw a faster acceleration in machine learning subfield developments probably for a period of 5 or 6 years. And I think, new things will inevitably take, more time to mature and, also be linked to new hardware architectures. But I spend a lot of time looking at things like massive scale simulation and generative design. And, you may or may not argue that these things are AI, but if you kind of group this kind of wider set of technologies under AI, then I think there are lots of areas where, computers will show intelligence either through some combination of, brute force and heuristics or machine learning or otherwise. But yeah, a long answer to a question, but maybe kind of for me, simulation is definitely a very kind of powerful technology right now.
Thank you. And investing at the earliest stages of startups and companies, Judith, tell us what will be the hottest in the next few years when we look at it at Series A, Series B+.
So I think for us, very clearly, 2019 and 2020 were kind of the years of NLP, and we saw some like fantastic breakthroughs where I think before, it was always kind of, the tech wasn't quite there. And of course, you had some, real progress in like translation and some use cases. But really, when it comes to like the broader applications, that was really still more of a horrible experience than a great experience. And I think on the research side, we've made some fantastic progress over the last couple of years. And that's really showing, kind of results now and coming to fruition. I think going forward, we're probably going to see, new advances also in computer vision, and some other areas. But I think for us, certainly, exciting NLP advancements have been kind of the buzzwords that we got most excited about. And I think to the point that you made around, lots of companies kind of, putting the AI tech on their decks, I think that's okay, right? I think, of course, you've got the types of companies that, have like, pure machine learning teams and like, AI is at the core of their value proposition. But I think it's great that there's other companies, that, don't necessarily come from kind of a pure AI background that are still able to, kind of harness these technologies and still do something with them, right? I think it's one, you shouldn't sell yourself as like a pure AI company. Like that's obviously a stupid thing to do. But I think, overall, the democratization of AI is something that we should celebrate as the venture industry, and, not something that we should say is only reserved to, an exclusive group of people, that have 20 years experience doing this. But I think overall it speaks, to the kind of, maturity that Ben also mentioned in the beginning of this technology, and now becoming more widely accessible in terms of solving all types of problems, even if it's just, kind of, automating an invoice or automating like a small part of the process that at the end of the day is still going to drive efficiency for a company and still going to help them in terms of, bringing the value proposition that they want to achieve forward.
So it's on the investors to look through all the buzzwords and understand if there's really something fundamental. So it's okay to start up through the window dressing, but it's our job to dive deeper and understand what's fundamental breakthrough.
It's okay to think about how you can use AI, right, to solve company problems. And I don't think you need to be an AI founder in order to do that, right? I do think there is enough democratization for other companies to also now start using this tool set, but you should still be true about, what the core of your value proposition is.
I see Dhruv nodding here. What do you think about that, Dhruv? Investing also in the later stages in the AI companies. How do you think about the hottest trends and what you just said?
Yeah, first of all, I think the NLP comment was really interesting. I was going to say something similar, but what we noticed, like especially at the later stages, is that it's kind of ironic that we talk a lot about these like very deep technologies, but at the later stages, the companies that seem to succeed are just making like tiny improvements, and they go a long way. I think a lot about like these automated invoices or automated sales processes, or just reading a transcript and being able to tell someone what's on that transcript from a call you have with a customer. I mean, it's kind of like sort of seems like pretty basic stuff to me, but it's just such low-hanging fruit. So I think before we get into like really interesting use cases of AI, we have to go through all these like basic use cases of like being able to understand what's going on in a conversation, being able to understand what's in an image. And like, there's just so many business applications for those things that haven't been done. I still use, terrible business software for pretty much every part of my job. So I think, I still have to manually add receipts to my expense report and things like that, and it doesn't recognize it. So I think, I get excited about all the early stage technology, but I think what's even more for me is like, even as we look at the later stages of investing, is just like very specific value propositions with a clear, like, hey, this improved my workflow by 20%. It's like a huge thing especially I think in the business world, it's amazing. I think a lot of these like robotic process automation startups have sort of started to take on some of these really, mundane tasks as well. I don't know if we'll group that into AI or not, but I think that's another area that we've been sort of watching and interested in. But I agree that some of the most early stage exciting stuff for me seems to be around what we're seeing with the advancements in like conversational, the ability to build these like conversational platforms where you have, you have bots or human, or, replacing the human, for example, in a conversation. And it's a little scary, but I think it's also, again, it could save huge amounts of costs in areas like customer success, or, these big call centers, for example. So I think we're probably going to see a lot of automation and opportunities to use AI there. And we've already invested in a couple of companies, but that seems to be the one. And then I think the others like computer vision that was also mentioned. I think we're seeing some interesting applications of that. But one thing that I've always found challenging is it's difficult to know the progress of each of these individual technologies. It's difficult to know where we are in deep learning research, and if we're hitting like a trend, a plateau, or if we're just keeping, for a while people are very excited about deep learning. And I think one of the things that's challenging is that early stage investors to figure out, are we really breaking through here, or is this just incremental improvement over the last like 6 years? And that's that I don't know. That's a really tough question.
To also double click on your first point, speaking about efficiency, humans versus bots, how do you, Ben, think about human in the loop? How comfortable are you still with human in the loop? Because as investors, obviously, we want to improve the margins. Yeah, we want to remove the humans in the loop. How do you think about that?
It's a very interesting question. And I was thinking about this when you were with one of the questions you asked the others earlier on. So one of the things about being a vertical AI company or an industry-specific AI company, and how you can maybe get started quicker, is because of things like human in the loop and things like having a product that will eventually be AI powered, but where you can have a much simpler version of it, or use simpler technologies earlier on to go to market quicker, get in the hands of customers, and learn with your customers what they need, and then learn how best to apply and develop the most, the more advanced technologies to kind of meet that need. So I think there is there's a positive side to using some of these techniques in the kind of, whether it's human in the loop, whether it's just, using simpler versions of these technologies to start with, in terms of, in more complex industries, or in industries that are, less used to adopting new technology, to just getting out there, getting the product in the hands of customers, and then being able to co-develop with them as a company, but also to, fund some of your growth through revenue as well as through, venture funding. But I think you need to have a clear plan for kind of how that's going to ramp down over time, in order to still convince investors who are relatively single-minded that in the end this stuff should be more scalable. I think it's an interesting question, and I think we should all be challenged on our kind of pattern recognition a bit. I think there are companies that I've seen who are kind of comfortable with the level of human in the loop they have, and see that as just part of the model and see that as part of the cost, and they're not delivering 90% plus margin software. They're delivering 70% plus margin software because that human component is just always a part of it for double checking, or for catching the the anomalous results, or whatever else. And so I think what inevitably happens is we're all seeing just more and more investors looking for great opportunities. Is probably those opportunities also become acceptable ones for investors who are happy to look at and take the risk of that profile of company, or who've had good experiences of scaling large in the loop kind of teams of humans to do that. I think there's also interesting business models that we're seeing in terms of outsourcing the human in the loop component, so it just becomes a cost and not an operational constraint as well. And so I think that's also an interesting development there.
Which businesses specifically are you speaking about? So the first thing which comes to my mind is data labeling, obviously one of the biggest bottlenecks in the data value chain. Do you have something else in mind? Or
no, exactly that kind of thing. You know, whether it's explicit sort of data labeling startups, whether it's just, you know, more general kind of outsourced, I mean, Mechanical Turk is like, you know, of course, the kind of the basic example of this, but where that becomes just a cost and not an operational complexity in a business, then I think it's much easier to get as an investor to go, well, you know, it impacts margin, but it's not going to break as we try and, you know, triple or quadruple or 10x our volume. Essentially, you know, obviously there's supplier risk in that.
Judith, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I love human in the loop. I think that's great. I think if you find businesses, you know, that work with the human in the loop, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're really running into from a productivity perspective is demographic change, right? And like in some near future, we won't have enough humans to do the work. And if we're waiting for AI to be perfect for the work to be done, then we're going to be waiting for a long time when it comes to solving a lot of the issues out there, right? So I think thinking about human in the loop is a real opportunity rather than a challenge, I think is the first thing that I'd say. And then I think it depends on the underlying problem that you're trying to solve. There are certainly, you know, certain problems where you need next to, you know, 99.9%, you know, accuracy and performance in order for that to work well. You know, drug discovery, for example, if you want to then, you know, deploy hundreds of millions because of that, you know, one molecule that, you know, is intended to do something else with another molecule, you better be sure that that's actually something that works. Whereas if you, for example, think about phishing, right? Like, you don't have to catch all the phishing emails, but if you catch 20% more than status quo, that's already, you know, great. So, you know, really thinking about what's the level of shittiness that you can, you know, kind of, you know, that you can accept and the solution's still working great, even if you know, we'll still need, you know, a human in the loop in the end, you know, to really kind of perfect the job. I think that's more the approach that we're taking. One of my favorite examples is also, you know, kind of translation, you know, like for certain tasks, you need 100%, you know, kind of perfection, right? When you're translating a book. So you're likely going to have humans in the loop for, you know, quite some time before you just, you know, let Harry Potter be translated into Chinese, you know, just by using AI. But then when it comes to Judith, you know, being in China, not speaking a single word of Chinese and suddenly being able to at least be able, you know, read restaurant menus. And yes, it's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what I had before, which was like basically not understanding a single thing. So I really always think about it from the context perspective of what's the level of, you know, shittiness and the tech not being quite there yet in terms of, you know, still the value capture and still the difference to the status quo, and that really kind of, you know, playing into the business case or the problem that you're trying to solve. And that's going to be different for different companies, but human in the loop, I think overall for a lot of different problems will be a great and fantastic way of, you know, getting to real business value.
So what you're also implicitly saying is it's first about the required level of accuracy for a specific problem. But second of all, I think it's also about the cost of labor. And I think that also translates into our next area of questions. When thinking about cost of labor, obviously is different if we think about outsourcing in India, in Africa, or wherever. Than it is in Europe, but also costs might be different in the US. Yeah, cost of labor, specifically in the Silicon Valley, hire an engineer and you know what it costs. Hire an engineer in Germany, it's obviously a bit cheaper. Hire an engineer in, I don't know, Southern Europe, it's again cheaper, Eastern Europe. So we have different levels of cost of labor. Dhruv, how do you think about AI in Europe versus US, considering that you also just expanded into Europe recently with your new office and you being here on the ground now? Is there something specific in mind if you think about companies in Europe versus US?
I guess it's a question about like talent, like where the talent is, and I think for a while we've always felt that there was a lot of talent, you know, in Europe. I mean, if you look at some of the university systems in the UK or in France, for example, in particular, I think there's a huge concentration of important, you know, impressive talent. I believe like Facebook has an AI, you know, had office in Paris, for example. So I think one of the key things with AI, it seems to be these days, is where is the best talent, which I would sort of differentiate from just software engineers at a lower cost, because I think actually probably the people in those research labs are probably getting compensated at the same rate they are in Silicon Valley, because it's very competitive for that very small set of talent. And then outside of that, there's a lot of, you know, very, very, very skilled software engineers, which is a slightly different phenomenon. But I think part of the reason we're excited about Europe is there's so much technical talent here, and to me it also seems that it is, you know, relatively more seems to be better in terms of the labor costs as well. But for the very high end AI talent, I believe it's probably very similar in terms of the cost across, you know, the UK, France, and the US, and that it starts to really change as you drop off into the more kind of entry level engineers. But I could be wrong about that, but that was just my impression, given that there's so few of these people and they're very specialized and usually working at Facebook or some university.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how you put together two parts of the equation. On the one hand side, those who build the AI products, like the researchers and so on, what you just mentioned. On the other hand side, the people we build these AI products for. So this is what we came from with human in the loop, cost of labor. Yeah, so I think it's you have better margins and higher cost savings if you improve productivity for people in the US versus if you improve it on an absolute level for people in lower labor cost countries. Ben, how do you think about specifically Europe versus US? And I understand you also invest in US, right? In terms of AI talent and characteristics of AI companies, do you see a difference there and pros or cons in either one ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, on the talent point, I think, you know, we have amazing technical universities across Europe. We have you know, some of the kind of pioneering groups in lots of these areas. I think that these people have, you know, the opportunity to work at Google or Facebook in Europe or to move to the US at this point. And so the kind of, as exactly as Jiv said, the kind of the cost or the cost of labor of that kind of talent is very high. And probably very comparable. I think what we're seeing now is just more and more capital flows into the startup ecosystem in Europe, is that the cost of any really, you know, any skilled engineering talent is just going up and up, because many more companies have more capital, and what they need is engineers, and what they're going to spend that capital on is kind of paying competitively and for engineers, and that drives that cost up. And so, you know, the number one topic in all of my board meetings this year, or in the last 3 months at least, has just been, you know, increasing competitive intensity for talent. I think in a way it puts more pressure / opportunity on building, you know, coming back to this horizontal and vertical point, on building tooling that means that less and less skilled engineers can still harness the power of these technologies, which is interesting. But I guess the question was about US versus Europe. I think what we're seeing now is that just becomes a less and less relevant distinction in any conversations or any vector, really. I think, you know, particularly when it comes, you know, specifically when it comes to AI and building AI technologies, I think we've got just as good talent here. We've got access to the best infrastructure, you know, available through, you know, if that infrastructure's been built in the US, it's available here. And I think what's always been exciting about Europe is the co-location of strong technical talent with strong industrial talent in different pockets in different places. You know, you look at the strength of the Industry 4.0 you know, market in Germany, where you've got amazing technical people with access to the best infrastructure in the world, co-located with, you know, people who had built careers and built great expertise in, you know, in the world's best engineering and manufacturing companies. And, you know, when those things combine, whether it's, you know, that in Berlin and Munich, and whether it's, you know, people from the financial services industry and technical talent in London, or in, you know, media and in the Nordics, or you know, whatever else it is, you know, those combinations, I think, are where Europe has a really strong opportunity to kind of, you know, outperform on applied AI, really.
Thank you, Ben. And just to add another angle to that, and knowing that this is also you did your home turf, is regulation a good or bad thing for AI in Europe?
So I think regulation is important, and, you know, that there are certain dangers or challenges, you know, when it comes to AI, you know, when it comes to military applications, both an opportunity and a challenge, by the way, I think. But overall, I think the ethical implications and dangers of AI should be taken seriously, and regulation can be a good mechanism for making sure that, you know, there is trustworthy and strong, you know, kind of ethical foundations of the AI companies that we're building. I think, having said that, you know, when it comes to European regulation, I do think there's an overexcitement when it comes to regulation and an overregulation that tends to happen. So, while I would agree with all the things that Drove and Ben have said, I think overall Europe still is not the #1 country when it comes to attracting AI talent, when it comes to, kind of migration policies, when it comes to very, very active, kind of communication in other countries, as to the standard benefits that, that Europe has when it comes to relocating here and starting your business here and, kind of working here. So I think that's something that we can be better on. It's got some regulatory aspects, but it's also just got some marketing aspects to it. I think the more interesting question is, what is going to be the foundation of AI regulation? And I think the big mistake that we made when it comes to GDPR, which was the last big regulation wave that swept over Europe, was there was a heavy discrimination against smaller businesses, because at the end of the day, they basically said you need to have more documentation, right? And so if you're Google or Facebook, well, guess what? It's quite easy to do that, because you can hire, dozens of lawyers and they can take care of that for you. So if we're forcing companies to, kind of go run through all these loops of, documentation and, very, very general kind of regulation categories that are, not very use case specific, and also speak to all types of AI, not just the kind of high risk, levels of AI when it comes to maybe autonomous driving or, drug discovery, but we're really kind of brushing everything, kind of with the same brush. I think that's then going to be quite challenging for a lot of startups out there that have very limited resources, can't hire tons of lawyers, and will really be scared, when it comes to founding a company, because suddenly there's all these different hoops they need to jump through, when at the beginning, we all know how iterative the process of even, doing AI or starting a company is, when you're really trying different things, you're seeing what works. And, if every time before you, think about, kind of training this model, scaling something up, you need to, be filling out these 10 different forms, that's going to do something to AI research and AI deployment in Europe. And I really hope, I do think there are some strong voices in Europe, that are trying to whisper into the ears of the Commission, and when it comes to being very use case specific, very, very narrow and concrete in the definitions that we, use AI for, and not, just AI as, anything, potentially just statistics, and then no one really knows, what they're going to end up, doing with all the regulation. I think that could really be the kind of worst scenario that we're running into. And we're going to see some updates coming out next month. And I really do hope that, we've learned from our past mistakes, and trustworthy and ethical AI is great. But at the end of the day, the big problem we need to work on is just, getting more companies off the ground, and too much regulation really won't help with that.
Thank you so much, Judith. Let's see if regulators learned from the past and do better in the future. So we are excited about this new update here. We are already through with the 45 minutes. This was very exciting discussion, and I think we can continue for hours. Thank you so much for joining us here. I would like to close this session with a one-sentence statement from each of you. Starting with AI is, and then please fill in. Think about it. Dhruv, why don't you start, and Ben, and then you did.
Okay, putting me on the spot. I think probably AI is embedded. I think we're never going to know it's AI. The best AI will just be working in the background, and it's probably going to be embedded everywhere. Maybe it already is. That's it. That's
Thank you. Ben?
Oh yeah, I started going down the wrong thought process. I'm going to make a prediction, which is always very dangerous to do. But let's go with AI is going to create $1 trillion of economic value over the next decade.
That's a big shot. Thank you. You did.
AI is the biggest opportunity and not the biggest challenge that Europe has faced in the last decade and in the coming decade.
Awesome. Thank you to all three of you. Thanks to the audience for listening. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. To all the founders out there who think to start something in AI or related areas, feel free to reach out to all of us. We are super excited to get in touch with you, and hopefully you enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you
for having us.
Yeah, and also many thanks from our side for the panel. And yeah, I will send you my pitch deck immediately. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Best wishes from Vienna.
Have a nice day.
Thanks.
All right, and we're a little bit behind time, and that's fine because we move right on to our next keynote, our next presentation.
Yes.
Live presentation, and let's see if we have a connection to Stefan Nagle of Round2 Capital. Hello, Stefan, can you hear us?
I can. I hope you can hear me as well.
Perfect. Loud and clear.
Loud and clearly. You
Very
prepared
good.
some slides for us, which are also already here. And I'd say the stage is yours for your presentation, and we see each other for the Q&A. And reminder to our audience, keep on asking questions on Slido or directly at the LinkedIn stream. We will show them and ask them to Stefan in the end. Good.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And I hope that I will be able to keep it somewhat short so that we have sufficient time actually for the Q&A at the end. So basically what I discussed with the organizers is that we talk a bit more in depth about the different business models we see that are more or less connected to AI or have components of AI in them, and how we look at them. Before I get into that, perhaps introduction, my name is Stefan Nagle. I'm managing partner of Round2 Capital. We are an investment fund based in Vienna. And what we focus on is actually providing revenue-based financing to growing companies, predominantly in B2B, predominantly in software as a service business model. So we usually get in at a bit of a later stage when there actually is a business model in place, revenue starts to be there. But nevertheless, we actually see a lot of companies that are on the path to reaching that stage, and basically are then with those companies on the path to growth and actually kind of getting the business models themselves. Before that, I spent a lot of time at McKinsey & Company, focusing mostly on strategy and corporate finance projects for clients along the whole telecoms value chain. So everything from operators, equipment manufacturers, to actually the whole service and application space that sits on top of the networks. And then basically decided I want to engage more in the areas where actually new stuff gets developed, and work with younger companies, and let being an investor and doing what I do. With Round2 Capital, perhaps last sense on that before we jump into it. We have now more than 20 portfolio companies across Europe, a bit of a focus on the DACH region, but also expanding from that. And as I said, the majority of those are actually in B2B, and they're in software service. I would say of those companies, between half and 2/3 have, in one way or the other, AI components in their product or use it to actually create value for their customers. So what I wanted to talk about today is a little bit just providing a very simple and rough framework on how to think about value creation in general, what it means for the development or evaluation of business models, and then how this relates to business models that are centered around, or at least have AI one way or the other built in. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And then, of course, in that context, and especially in the life cycle progression of companies and business models, talk about what this means for financing and the different financing instruments available. And then we hopefully have sufficient time to address any questions resulting from that. So let me try to here. I can't seem to do. So across that, basically, I try to always keep things very simple. That does not mean easy, but simple nevertheless. And the couple of questions that I always want to make sure I understand whenever I look at a new company, and the question that I hopefully hope the teams are able to express in a very clear and succinct manner are actually those two, right? Number one is, how do I actually create value for my customers? And but basically under the consideration that any kind of value that I express is at the end of the day a function of time. Expressing that in monetary terms is a nice shortcut how do I actually create value one way or the other, right? And the second question is, what can I do that is very hard? So what is really kind of a sustainable skill, a sustainable capability, a sustainable part of the product that I have and that is actually very hard for anybody else to do? Around that component of things that I know to do that are very hard, I can build a strategy around that, because the strategy at the end of the day is less than building an approach that allows me to extract part of the value that I've created for my customer, right, and do that in a profitable manner, and actually do that in a sustainable manner, so that I cannot necessarily be replaced from one moment to the next. So let's get into value creation, and I would ask you to with me very shortly on this framework. On the upper left-hand side, basically, just talk about the value that you create. You create value by whatever, saving your customers time, doing something else, reducing costs. You create value. Sorry for that. And then basically from the value that you created, you are hopefully able to extract the value for yourself, right? That's a small cutout of the circle. You can value, your business model is able to the value for you, be it in whatever kind of pricing scheme that you have developed for your customers. And then you multiply that with the number of your customers, and that somehow is the value that comes into your business. And then below the line, what you actually have there is the time and energy that you need to deploy in the business, either yourself or by stuff that you have to procure from somewhere else and plug in, right? And what is a business? Well, a sustainable business is a business that over time at least makes that equation come out to be larger than one, right? Or at least over time, at least the upper part and the lower part become break even, not sustainable, right? Value gets destroyed. So then when you think about going further and say, okay, what are then my options to increase the value creation, right? And number one is, of course, I can increase the value that I create for any single customer. What does that mean in practical terms? That means I have more features, the features get better, usability increases, whatever happens, right? The value that you create for your customer increases. That's option number one. And if then more or less your general value extraction or business model stays the same, as the pie gets bigger, your share itself gets bigger. The second, you try to increase the value you created that goes actually, right? That's the red number 2 here. And that basically means, well, my customers have understood actually how much value I create. So I'm actually in a better position to negotiate. I'm able to change my pricing. I'm actually perhaps also able to change my model. So I'm no longer charging single license fees or user-based subscription, but I actually take a share of whatever transactions are running across my product. There are tons of different ways, right? But I touch the way that I interact with my customer. I extract part of I create for my customer to that manner that increases. Of course, the value for myself increases. We have number 3, that basically you're simply running the same logic, creating value for more customers. So you get more customers, you multiply it, and all of that hopefully at the end of the day works out. So that's where you want to get to, right? You want to have a clear perspective on what kind of value am I creating for my customers. You want to have a clear perspective in terms of how do I extract actually my share of the value that I created. And you want to have a clear perspective on how this whole exercise is actually scaling on a customer level. And even without going deep into a discussion around P&Ls, balance sheets, and all the analysis and planning that everybody's doing, if you're not able to express the story of how you create value and how it leads to a sustainable business for yourself, that should be able, from a narrative perspective, you should be able to explain in a couple of sentences at the end of the day, right? And that's what I'm always looking for. That's what I try to extract in the first step. I look at pitch decks, when I look at anything else. I want to be able for me to understand how this works. Now, of course, none of this is set in stone when things get started and depend on the life cycle stage of the business overall, right? So when you just get case, you might have a, again, rough idea of the kind of value you could create with the idea that you have, right? So then you get going, and you might have a better idea on the kind of value you create. You might have first ideas on basically what the model would look like, how you extract your share of the value you create, and you might have your first set of crazy customers, right? And then you would get to the stage of achieving product market, basically where it becomes more solid. You're actually able to say, okay, yes, can create this value. I have proven that my way of extracting my share of the value works, and I've done that by actually applying it to more. If you've done that, then you can go into scale up and basically focus very much on the basically growing the customer base. So that is very simple, right? In that sense. On the other hand side, the doing of it is of course very hard, and of course a strictly linear process, because there are built into the whole exercise, and you might have to try a couple of times, right? The test associated to that is, however, again, how clear am I on the different pieces and components of this whole thing when I talk myself, when I talk about myself in terms of which state am I actually in? Which state am I actually in? How solid are actually the lines in the different pieces of the puzzle? And we come back to that because I think, of course, this applies to everything. There are challenges, in my view, with regards to moving through those different stages when it comes to business models that have an AI component or are heavily centered around creating completely new technologies or technology applications. But before we do that, let me quickly talk about a bit of a perspective of how actually in different business models value gets created from AI, right? The business model logic is always the same, and yes, there are no different rules for business anything to do with AI, right? Because still kind of value needs to get created, value needs to get extracted, and there are no different rules of the game, right? So, but when you think about what value creation can stem from AI in different types of businesses or in different progressions, then starting from the left, you basically have the pure tech. What I mean by that is you have actually come up with a way to do something that could not be done before with data, right? You have a different way of looking at language. You have a new of analyzing pictures, what have you, right? So there's tech, a potentially enormous application space and a potentially, from an idea perspective, enormous source of value creation if you just take the very broad lens in what could be possible. The second piece as well, the whole fundamental approach is perhaps not new, but what I've actually been able to do is find a way to create better results, right? So I'm creating a better output, especially as it relates to whatever I do with the analytical piece of it, the AI piece of it. And better results could mean basically getting things right more often, right? So whenever you think about analysis that have something to do with predictive maintenance, any basically decision preparation that gets triggered by an AI algorithm, and basically making sure that the whole results are better in the sense that they are more often right than whatever was there before, or they provide a different level of granularity, what have you, right? The output is better. The other source of value creation or differentiation would come from output. And what I mean by that is basically overall, what I'm trying to do has been done before, but actually I'm able to do this as a completely different scale, or I'm able to do this at speed, or I'm able to do that in a much more seamlessly integrated way with anything else that's going on. Right? A good example here also, our portfolio companies, you can have recommendation engines in all different shapes and form, but then suddenly, especially talk about video, it becomes a question whether you're on the full scale are able to deliver the recommendation engine results in real time or close to real time or not. Different analysis, especially also when it comes to elements like route planning and stuff like that, scale, speed, also connectedness matters, right? Even though the analysis itself that is happening underneath might not be fundamentally new, but the way that it gets applied. So then the fourth piece here is where what's actually happening is that there is a solution to digitize a piece of a process or support a specific, very specific, and basically the AI component of it is more or less working in the machine room of the whole exercise. Actually, what you talk about is how process gets supported differently, or where the resulting product is able to actually enable companies or customers to digitize part of the processes that they could not digitize before, right? And then last piece on the slide here that stands a bit aside in my view, but that is basically a more or less combination roughly of all of the before, but also fundamentally different in the senses I'm doing something here, I'm creating a product that is actually fully disrupting something on the customer side, right? So a good example to think about it is when you think about applications in the design or construction space, where basically you could say, hey, I'm able to design a car now, or at least the basic framework of a car, with a very limited set of parameters as an input, and actually I have an AI, or I have an application that is then actually designing a framework, and that will for the car, and that looks completely different than whatever basically engineering departments have come up with. It's constraints around what you can do, or what you could do, what you could calculate from an engineering perspective in previous times, right? So that's really become something completely new, that's great. So let's park the last one a little bit. I want to basically focus a little bit also with regards of the company companies, I'm seeing, let's say, the spectrum between the pure tech side on the other hand side and the contribution part, if you want to call it that, of AI being part of a broader solution for a specific process, for a specific industry. And the point that I want to make again, that it's very important, I think, for any company to be clear in what they fundamentally believe the sustainable source of value creation for customers will be in terms of what you're and where you are on the journey. Short example, right? Or two cases of how a roughly similar story just lands very differently, at least in my ears, right? So you could, I've come up with a better, more beautiful, more precise, what have you, way of analyzing language, different languages, different types of languages, written, spoken, what have you, right? And you basically explain how this fundamentally everything and the application space is global and everything is great, right? And then you've told that story, and then you say, and what I've decided to do now is basically create a first use case in the insurance claims process for insurances in country XYZ. And I have decided to now basically go through the tedious process of running proof of concept projects for the next 2 years until I've somehow established that this use case works, and then that is what I'm going to scale from there. And whenever I hear those kind of stories, I always get super excited on the tech and the opportunity in the beginning, less excited about scaling the insurance claims process that's actually happening at the end, right? On the other hand side, if you come to me and say, I have incredible domain expertise in the insurance claims process, I know how actually to digitize it. And yes, there's a component, or there is a key AI component built into how I'm doing that, and that is how I'm winning, and that is what I'm scaling. Then I understand more directly how what you're currently doing will actually lead to value creation going forward, and they basically set the path to scale. So what I'm not saying is that one is necessarily better than the other, right? But if you actually bring this together with what I tried to discuss before, the lifecycle piece of it, it means somehow, especially for AI product investment, or where the tech capability might be just magnitudes larger compared to where the initial business lies, that it's very important to say, when am I actually consciously moving out of the stage where I try to basically create something that creates value, and I try to prove the value overall, versus I'm now trying to lock down a specific way how this gets, a specific value creation logic for a specific type of customers, in a specific framework, in a specific process, in a specific use case, right? And many companies, it's much, because they are starting more from a use case perspective, but whenever you're starting more from a tech kind of logic, then basically you always need to be aware of what, from an overall value perspective, the opportunities costs are of taking the step in locking down the first use case and actually trying to just build a business around the use case. I think those are are actually the very hard decisions to make when you have a business that is more fundamentally built around new analytical AI-related capabilities that might have a very broad application space. And the reason why this is also quite relevant is because how you think about financing during the life cycle impacts then also what you do, right? So in general, when I look at it, is, well, if you're in the idea stage, that's clearly an equity game. Also, basically, until you get started, until you have achieved product market fit, you've actually locked down a certain kind of business model that you're starting to scale. It's an equity game. Yes, grants can be in place. Depends always on where you are and what is applicable. But when you get into the scaling up phase, right, you actually have a business model, and that makes sense. I can make an argument of how I'm getting more customers on that business model, and the whole thing is actually moving also toward a, at least operationally, profitable path. Then I can have a broader range of financing instruments put to task against, and then have a revenue-based finance, other debt components, essentially because also I have just a much more predictable path forward, and of course at some point you reach maturity. So again, as you move through that cycle, and depending, of course, how quickly you want to get to the phase type of business, okay, that defines how long the let's say dependent in a completely objective kind of way on getting equity into your company, right? It also means if you're basically in a business model, when I look at it from the other end side, I have actually locked in a business model. I want to bump off the financing that I take. Well, if I'm then, for example, a revenue-based finance provider, sure you scale your revenues, right? Because that's where I partake in terms of the value created. So actually, for me, it only matters whether you actually, in that use case, perhaps add on one or two more. But I take much less reliability on the original opportunity space or the original value creation space that's resulting. And that is, I think, kind of fundamental thoughts, decisions, or at least at any given point in time, a clarity on where do I actually stand and what am I trying to do. I hypothesis on how I'm actually going to move with my path through those different stages and at which point in time. I think that is a super valuable, also just self-check, and it should be more or less a constant reflection on whether the original thoughts and hypotheses still hold true, right? So what it comes down to is basically say, am I actually very clear how do I create, right? And then how does that tie up to I do that is very hard, and two things, then everything else falls in terms of what is my model to extract my share of the value and actually start growing something. All right, I would be through with that. I hope we have some time left for Q&A. I've talked a lot, and of course it would be much greater to see you all, but I hope somewhat interesting.
Yes, thank you so much, Stefan. And
or at least has triggered perhaps some questions. And
yes, we have received a lot of questions, and maybe we can have a look at them together. People are still voting on the questions and still asking their own questions on Slido.
Asking their own voting questions.
So maybe let's just check them out. So Anonymous asks, B2B software as a service was a major trend in the last 10 years. However, many startups had troubles to stay independent and got bought by Microsoft, etc. What would it take, in your opinion, to have an independent, large AI player 10 years down the road, similar to what Salesforce has achieved in software as a service?
So I think let's take it backwards, right? The reason why Salesforce was able to grow, I think, to the size that they have is actually because they have focused clearly on the domain expertise in a specific function and everything built from there, right? And the whole point of basically saying that they had the first mover advantage and actually kind of trying to digitize sales processes and how things get organized around that. But basically, and that was never interesting for anybody who was in the space of productivity software or anything else, right? It was really kind of a new piece of the overall space, and that's what they were able to grow. I think it's simple as that, and it again centered on the very specific domain expertise. So on the other side, I think, yes, that I think is still possible. But I think, again, the root of it would either be to say, I have a final domain that is neglected by somebody else, right, for whatever reason, where it's actually also it might be huge, but in the greater scheme of things, it's not attractive enough for the large tech companies to invest in it themselves. So I think those are areas where things could develop. I think what is still underdeveloped from an overall business model perspective, right? Coming back to coming to the other side, the pure tech play, by basically thinking about business models where you say, I know how to do the actual tech, the hard stuff, the machine room. I actually fully accept that I do not need to be the one who's building this into the products with the domain expertise. But I'm able to set up a way where my tech and my capability can be used in many different spaces, right? And the tech actually becomes a standard setter and not the single application in the domain. And around those kind of things, business can be built to scale, probably also much harder, or much to be really big. But it's harder, definitely. Right? It's much harder going that route.
So focus on the tech, not on the application or a group of clients, is the way to stay independent, also 10 years down the road, and also to keep on.
I'm not sure whether independent is a value in itself, right? If you think about it like that, I think your chances of growing to a huge scale and being independent is being in a domain that nobody has taken care of yet, right? Or where it's hard for anybody else. I think that's if you want to have a most predictable path, that's it.
All right. No, thank you. This is definitely a large question, a complex of questions, actually.
Yes.
And let us know, Anonymous, if this is a good answer. And the next most upvoted question: how do you see valuations in AI in Europe versus US and China?
So I try to make it very simple. I think it's not that AI gets valued, right? Business models, or at least value creation opportunity, gets valued. So, and everything else is either the story not being told with the right angle or anybody being confused. So I think this is too broad to basically draw any conclusion by just saying, how do companies that have an AI component get valued here or there? Yeah.
So it's about the product and the business model.
Yes.
Antonio asks, considering the traction of AI technology, could machine learning performance monitoring solutions have a durable spot within this trend?
Yes. I mean, I think, again, performance monitoring has so many different shapes and sizes, but actually I think that is one of the fundamental pieces where AI will just continue to get stronger, and you will almost at one point have no single process, no single decision that at least gets an input from some kind of diagnostic or monitoring application that most likely is then also AI supported. That is really what I fundamentally believe. And I think it's not perhaps a half sentence on that. It's not necessarily always a question of this needing to be hugely complex, right? So I think it's especially whenever you talk about performance monitoring or also of machinery or anything else, there is the one trend to say I put, be it physical or otherwise, tons of sensors against something, and then I build a huge model and somehow I try to predict something, right? On the other side, I had discussions with guys who are basically monitoring production machinery, and they're saying, no, actually my model just needs one single input, and that is the production speed. But I'm getting into production speed in such a granular level that I'm actually able from that one data point extract a huge amount of information, right? And even that, especially when you think about the complexity of not only being able to do the analysis, but actually how much input do you need, how much investment does your customer need besides to pay you your fees or your licenses, how much does he need to get ready and prepare? I think that's a huge component, and the more straightforward and easy those kind of performance monitoring solutions are, I think the more success they will have. And yes, and I believe they will be everywhere.
Great. Then with regard to the time, let us pick up the last question. Oh, for this one I need an hourglass. This is tiny.
Wait, let me help you, Clemens.
Old man looking for the internet.
I can read it to you.
It's many AI SaaS products require consulting, in brackets PowerPoint and coding services, before deployment. Investors are typically not in favor of this revenue source. How do you differentiate from an investment perspective between necessary consulting for scaling, like SAP and Oracle is doing, versus a distracting source of revenue?
So I think that part of the revenue stream is a more or less fundamental, almost necessity for a lot of B2B software as a service companies, right? So I basically, unless you're really able to afford to take the costs and more or less build it into whatever you charge in terms of subscription transaction value and somehow make the whole equation work, fine, but you're actually kidding yourself, right? You still have a business that requires consulting, even if you say it's all baked into the subscription fees. So from an operational standpoint, this is much more, it's less about kind of the revenue stream, it's what do you actually need operationally. And of course, you should aspire to minimize the need of consulting or kind of customization or whatever you need to do, but that simply does not work in many areas. I think the more interesting discussion around that is, do I actually need to perform this myself, or what are the right points in time where I'll focus less on trying to do everything via direct sales, but actually build a credible partner network that basically keep my revenue stream clean, and they're getting the value from the deployment and everything else, depending on what my scaling approach is. So I think actually running this kind of activity is something that is here to stay, especially in B2B, also in B2B software and service, especially when you're selling to mid-sized and enterprise level customers. So it's really just need to differentiate basically how do I want to tackle that on the business side of things from the revenue streams, and how do I want to tackle it operationally, right? And I think but those are not necessarily the two same discussions in my point of view. And basically, if you try to push in B2B, what of course everybody likes because it's similarly predictable is to run a B2B software as a service like a B2C software as a service, right? It's completely self-serve. You just do tons of marketing, people on board, yes, they churn out, but actually you almost don't notice because everything just happens automatically. I just think the really kind of fundamental tools or applications that actually change processes, etc., will be processes that where a lot of people actually need to change their behavior, and you need to steer this change of behavior, and that's where it needs customization, consulting, and everything else.
All right, thank you so much for this answer. Value creation in AI business models. This was a really interesting session. We received too many questions to answer in our short time slot.
Yeah, which is a good sign.
Which is always a good sign. So sorry. But Stefan Nagle is actually on our matchmaking platform, so you may reach out directly to him if you have some concrete question. Don't spam him with investment requests, etc. Please. We won't come again.
No, but happy to get in touch, and thanks for having us. And
thank you so
good luck
much
with the rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks for joining, and yeah, looking forward to see you again in the future.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye, Stefan.
Have a nice day. Bye. So, and this brings us directly to our next session, which I'm very happy about, because Women in AI is one of our partner organizations at AI Austria. And yeah, we tried to do some bigger event together since actually quite some time. Then COVID-19 hit, but now finally, knocking on wood, we are able to host our joint session, which we have been planning for 18 months. So please welcome with us on the stage first Sanja Jovanovic and Karina Zehetmeier.
Hello and welcome on stage. Can you hear us, Karina and Sanja?
Great. Hi. Can you see us and hear us?
Yes, perfectly. And just for a quick intro, Karina Zehetmeier is the ambassador for Austria of Women in AI, and also the founder of Textastic, an AI startup, so to say. But actually, she comes from a background of diplomacy and human rights and ethics. And very interesting to hear your take on the topic of diversity and why diversity matters, because let's see if we have the other speakers. Karina, I hand over the main lead to you, and I get your other speakers on board. Just a second.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the great introduction. I would also have some slides to share. Is that okay?
Of course.
You're the boss.
Perfect. So share screen. So I hope it works. Give me 1 second. Can you see my slides?
They will appear soon. And of course, to our audience, we restart the Slido questioning tool. So please, during the presentation of Women in AI, feel free to ask your questions, and we will answer them in the Q&A session at the end. So there is your screen, and here are your slides.
Perfect.
Thank you.
The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much for having us. We are delighted that we can participate in this amazing international conference. And thank you for the very nice introduction. So to get started, Women in AI Austria, why? Well, as all of you participating today, you know that AI is shaping our present and will even more be shaping our future. So there is great opportunity for all of us. However, there are also some risks, and we just think we need to get it right from the beginning and to make sure that we basically create a future and technology that serves us all as humanity and every single one of us, we believe there should be, or has to be, must be, more diversity. However, yet there are only 22% of all the AI experts globally who are women. And this 22% means really from all industries. So not only mathematicians and data scientists, but really from legal experts, ethicists to the techies, basically. So we think there is a problem, and that is why Women in AI was originally created on an international level. But also we here in Austria have the same mission. So basically, we are non-profits organizations, and we are working towards gender-inclusive AI to make sure that AI actually benefits us all and contributes to a fairer society. Therefore, we are on a mission to increase female representation and participation in the field. And how do we do that? So we are an interdisciplinary network bringing together, as mentioned before, experts from various fields. And then we come together in groups of different interests and we work on different topics. So, for example, one of our biggest pillars is actually policy, where we try to really comment on every policy paper or legal document that crosses our way. To give you an example, we recently commented also on the DSA, DMA, and currently we're looking at the proposed EU regulation on AI, and we also worked on a risk framework for privacy and AI from the UK. And so we are always happy about new topics, so if you have something, just let us know. Also, we are active in education. So we just ended this week our Women in AI Accelerate program together with Germany, where we were trying to push female founders to start their startups in AI with AI-driven technologies. And obviously we do a lot of events. So we are happy to participate and looking forward to this huge event in the future together with Clemens and hopefully also the WKO, where we can shed even more light on diverse topics of interests together. Also, we are organizing, cooperating in projects, handing in EU projects with other partners, and we have quite some publications, mostly on Medium. And last but not least, the most important part of our organization is really community and network. So we are trying to really bring the community together, have kind of events where also less experienced speakers can show their know-how, the things they're working on, like our networking lunches, but also have high-level speakers in the different events, and then just connect people coming from different fields, but all having the mission to make AI work for us all. So currently, Women in AI Global is operating in more than 115 countries and has more than 6,000 active members. And here in Austria, we are very active in all Austria as the organization as such, but we also have local communities in Upper Austria, Vienna, and Carinthia. So if somebody wants to open a new chapter, please reach out to me. And yeah, basically that's us, or some of us. We are currently here in Austria about 30 women, but we're not only open to women, so we would be very happy to welcoming some men and other gender in our community. And we are reachable here on LinkedIn. You can follow us under Women in AI Germany. We have a common channel, and we will be launching our website very soon. Yes, and with this, I'm excited to hand over to Sanja, who will moderate and introduce the panelists of the next panel. And now, since Matthias actually also mentioned me as a panelist, I'm wondering whether I should stay in the panel as such. But so Sanja, I hand over to you.
You can definitely stay, I would say.
Great. You have some background noises, I think.
Oh, really? That's not. Do the others, Clemens? Do you also hear background noise? No. Okay, I see some.
I can hear you very well.
Okay, perfect. Good. So let me welcome you all. We're so glad to be part of this event, and also I'm really happy to welcome 3 or the 4 ladies in the panel. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Sanja Ivanovic. I'm working as a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and I'm also part of the Women in AI Austria initiative that we launched a year ago. And I'm part of the Vienna team and also the Vienna lead. So I would like to introduce our panelists today. We have Gabriele Bulle-Kügel, we have Isabel Klaus, Alexandra Tarnau, and Karina, who just spoke about women in AI. And just to give you a heads up who will be present here, I kind of tried to summarize everything what you three have done so far, and it was a lot. So I'm really impressed by all your backgrounds and what you have done so far, also for the community as well. So Gabriele worked for more than 22 years in the area of IT compliance, primarily at international auditing networks, where she focused on data protection, compliance frameworks, and cybersecurity. She's our vice president of Women in AI Austria, and now she's focusing a lot on artificial intelligence and also supporting companies to successfully use AI. So a perfect match for today's panel. She's also co-founder and CEO of Compliance2B, which is a platform that allows whistleblowing in companies. So basically, employees can report unethical or like illegal behavior without a fear of reprisal. So basically, making sure that everybody who has either seen an incident or experienced an incident can really submit that without any fear of what will happen. Isabel, you are very active in the female entrepreneurial scene in Europe, but also beyond, and you're the CEO and co-founder of Thinkers AI. And Thinkers AI is mainly machine learning-based technology that defines and redefines the field of web and market research. And what I found very, very interesting is that you have spent some time in various countries. So I saw that you completed studies within legal and in the business domain at universities such as the London School of Economics, Harvard, Dubai University, and also Singapore University, and also completed your doctoral studies at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. And I think even more important is that you were part of the cybersecurity market leader, Rather Cybersecurity, which where you actually spent a lot of time being the corporate communications leader and also part of the leadership team. And the startup was announced and rewarded as one of the 100 top growing companies in EMEA. So that sounds really interesting. And I'm super glad to have you both on board. And Alexandra, you are a lawyer in the IT IP data protection team at Dada, where you joined 2016. And your main focus is in IT and data protection law and everything that is kind of involved with digitalization and e-commerce. So your work or like your expertise is everything about intellectual property, unfair competition law, and also anything legally regarded to new technologies such as AI and blockchain. You're also a member of Dorda's Digital Industry Group. I'm curious what that is and how that fits into also the version of diversity. And you're also part of the Women in AI initiative in Austria, where you're just like working on a lot of initiatives with us as well. So Karina, you did your introduction, but basically you're the CEO of and co-founder of Techstastic. You're the president of Women in AI Austria, and basically whatever has happened within the community here, I think you own a big piece of that. So I think the backgrounds and like the experience that everybody has are very diverse, but there's one thing that each one of you has actually in common, which is working towards a more diverse environment. And therefore, I'm very pleased to welcome you for this panel and also introduce you to the topic of today, which is why diversity matters, both in business and AI. So just like asking any one of you who's ready to tell your opinion about that, what do you think about the current status in business? So actually, I would like to start more on the business side, and then move forward to the AI space as well. So what do you think about the current status? Is there something, like looking back a couple of years ago, is there something that has been improved already? Or are there still some aspects that we really need to focus on in regards to diversity in business? And also please think about diversity not only being gender, but really looking at age, backgrounds, racial, social, economical aspects, like anything that we think of diverse, because as we know, diversity is really a broad topic and can be interpreted in various ways.
Yes, thank you, Sanja, for the introduction from my side. Very happy to join you on this important topic, and would like to focus on your question. And I think there are things developing, so that's a good thing at the beginning. So we are on a journey in a way, and there are things, there's much to do, but it started, yeah, and it got much better for the last like 5 or 6 years, and this is a good thing. The thing that we have to keep in mind for the future, and this is for business as well as AI, there will be jobs in the future that are no longer existing, and these are jobs that especially women or other people are working in, and we have to react early in order to get these people in different jobs. So there's really a need. It's not a nice to have, it's a must that we go on this journey, not only from a company side, yeah, but also from a personal level for all of us, for the next generations. So this is just the opening to say, yes, great that things develop, great that we talk about it, and we have some speed, but there's still a lot of things to do.
Thank you. I totally share your opinion, Isabel. I do, however, come from a little bit another angle, and see also diversity as a very relevant and important factor for implementing new technology. Why? Well, it is documented that lack of diversity, for example, in the field of research, engineering, and so on, may indeed result in a huge bias technology on a large scale. So it is very important to also build up a team that works with AI that is diverse and includes many different aspects, social, racist, age, and so on, just to improve also the technology itself. So that's my statement on this.
So Alexandra and Isabel, I totally agree with you. I think the business models of the future will be more complex, and we need to focus more on diversity because the markets will be diverse, and we can only encourage everyone to buy in our company if we are a diverse company and can target a diverse market. So I see that the younger generations are more prepared to have diversity in mind. So the a little bit older generation, as I have been, we focus more on hierarchical structures and not so much on teams and diverse teams. So I think we need to learn much more from the younger generation and will be successful in diverse markets when we learn from them.
I know that Gabi, you have worked on international projects, and I know that Isabel, with your experience, you also were very international. And Alexandra, also you on your side, managing and advising both international and national customers. And my question is more about how do you see Austria compared to other countries? Is it something that we are doing quite okay, I would say, because I think there's always room for improvement, as we know. But also looking back at your experience that you have had a couple of years ago, I'm just like curious how we are compared to the international status quo.
I will just go first on that because I just have so many thoughts in my mind. Well, compared to the past years, I think we have indeed made a great step forward. However, there are still countries which are much more innovative. For example, US or the Asian market. They, I don't know why, but also a little bit depending on the legal framework, of course, what can you do and how far can you go? But it's also a mindset thing. They are more open to innovative projects and say, yeah, let's do it. Let's try and to realize a new project. And if we fail, we fail. And if we succeed, we succeed. So that's okay. I think they do have a little bit another mindset on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there is still some way to go in Austria, and compared to other markets, as you said, Alexandra, there's just this mindset that where I guess Austria is not a front runner. Yeah, I guess we do our steps, but yeah, we can do much better and much more, and it's moving a bit slowly in compared to internationally. So on the company side as well, on the company side, the focus has to be more on doing things, bringing things to practice. Yeah.
If I may jump in, I actually have something to add also still to the first question, but I think it fits kind of both maybe. So from my background in the United Nations, where which was always my biggest goal, to work with an international diverse communities, saving the world basically. I just learned, and I think that sometimes at first, these topics may slow you down because you get different opinions or different inputs or something that might hinder very fast progression on just like developing something. But in the end, to make sure that creating solutions, whether they are political level or on a technical level, to fit the users or the people living in the country, I think it's very comparable. You just need to make sure that there are these ideas of different stakeholders involved. And honestly, it's much easier said than done, because as a female founder, I have to confess also to put some spice into the discussion, and I have currently a very male-dominated team, and it was very hard for us. Like, although we were trying to talking to right people, but just from the network, that how our team emerged, it happened to be now we're 7 people, and I'm the only woman currently, and the CEO. But we really need to change that. But although thinking about this topic and really wanting to do it, we didn't manage. But I know that Isabel has a better track record. So that's why I also admire her. I think I will get some advice on that topic as well. But I think it's really important to have diversity to make sure that solutions work for the users or the humans in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can add on this. So we are 50% women and 50% men in the company. And I'm very also proud on that, because there is some work behind it, actually. So some really, work on that in regard to really inviting and being present at many women-centered initiatives. And also at the universities directly. So often we get, especially the data scientists from universities, and we are also focusing on getting them early. So if it's an internship or something like this, I have to say I do prefer to take the women. Yeah. And so this is how we come to 50-50 actually, to be honest. Yeah. And we are having a big focus on keeping this balance. So this is also a challenge because we grow every month. We get on new employees. So there is some drive behind and lots of initiatives. And I'm very thankful for initiatives like Women in AI because it has to be focused and you really have to get young women to get to know you and to know, hey, there is a woman on top, like Karina, as the CEO, there is a woman, and I can try to go into these companies, especially because they have a focus on women on top. And this has some meaning. And I'm sure, Karina, it won't take long for you to get the next female employees.
Let me just add that. Sorry for interrupting, but I have to complete this. You just said that you have a very strong focus to elect women and prefer women rather than men. Well, just for clarification, I think we are both on the same side if we say high skills are the minimum requirements. And everyone has the same requirements. You're going to select the people based on inclusion aspects and diversity aspects, but the basis is at least having a very high skill, being passionate about technology, and so on. So these aspects shouldn't be missing when saying that, and I hope you're fine with that.
Absolutely. It's just to go the extra miles to reach the females, actually.
But maybe this leads me to my next question. Do you agree with that, or how do you see the measurements that companies are taking, such as like the ratio of employing either women or any like other groups as well, to make sure to get more diverse? Do you think this is a necessity, or do you think it would work without that as well?
So when I may jump in that question, what I think is we should not work on female quotas for getting more females in a leadership role. We must work on the mindset of the males too, because we are not better, we are not lesser for some of the tasks in the company prepared, but everyone should see that every human has his own skills, and we should focus on what human is the best in that place. So it's not necessary that we have a female quote. So I think we need to work on males' mindset so that they can accept if they have a female chief or head of, and work with them together without thinking, oh, she's not as good trained than me. So I think this is the biggest challenge we have today.
Because like what I could also tell from my experience, like if you have those quotas, maybe whoever got hired just like receives or gets the feeling that, oh, maybe this was because of that fact, which is actually counterproductive in the end as well. So I'm just looking at the time, it's almost 12 and we have a couple of minutes left. Therefore, I would like to switch topic and just move to the AI side as well and look into your experience, since every one of you is working not like either technically or not, but in the business field of AI. How do you see the current challenges on diversity in AI? I think everybody has heard or read about like models more like classifying or working more positive towards, for for example, white male versus other ethical groups as well. So is there something that you would especially like to put focus on, especially working in an AI startup or working with AI projects?
I think when coming to the technical, coming from the technical side, many things start very early, like in school, like the education, and we just noticed during the last year that there is still so much to do to have these technical skills and to have a equal a balance between how do I act and educate women and men or whomever you address, can I do it equally? Yeah? And especially in the technical field, it's a big issue where there needs to be done so much, unbelievable much. Saying that, being a mother of two, and just noted how things happen in schools and how it's communicated, and everything that is not communicated or not done or fostered very early. And I guess this makes a big difference to the path that somebody takes in university and later on, or other fields.
So I totally agree with you. So sometimes it's very offensive that women will not be challenged in technical areas as young boys do. But on the other side, I will keep you in mind that not all jobs which are in the area of artificial intelligence are very technical. So we have so many organizational things to follow up, and to structure data, to label them, there are so many things which are not very technical. I think we as females, we can contribute to these jobs too, even if we are not in a technical area on the university.
That's actually a cool comment that you made. Like, just looking at the audience as well, what do you think, or how would you animate more women to join the area of AI? Because honestly, like, I kind of experienced it myself, and I started to like it, and I saw the challenge, and it was so cool. Let's look into that. But what's your approach on how to really animate more, like show what the potential is? Because I think it's still like some kind of stereotype that if you hear it, you think it's totally technical, and then you compare what you have from your experience, and you kind of get afraid of not applying or joining this area.
If I may jump in. Anna. So Gabi and I were sharing a room. This is why we're having technical issues from time to time. But very briefly, so I think, or I guess that's what we all think at Women in AI. This idea of having role models, or just having some of us who are not from technical professions, but totally into the topic, and then taking decisions on or evaluating risk of AI systems, or making sure that how we use the data is actually GDPR compliant, and all these topics that are around. And there is I think when we talk about machine learning, we mostly think about the data, and what Gabi said before, there is a lot about garbage in, garbage out. And so one of the biggest challenges is, like, do you manage to have a representative data set that you actually use to then make decisions for human beings around the world? And does it apply can it be applied really to the different groups that there are and individuals? So I think in these roles, there are a lot of roles, or in these jobs, there are a lot of roles that we simply don't think about, and that will be a big trend for the future. But besides that, I think that what Isabel said, like we are also trying as organization to get some funding, if somebody hears that, to actually go to schools and try to reach girls. And there's a huge problem also with dropout rates from technical universities. So we think that our network could be great to motivate female students in programming classes, for example, to just like stick it through and see what options there are. And so I think it's really the power of the network to reach actually mostly women and other groups who have not thought about them in the sense of the opportunities that the technology can bring for them in their careers.
Nicely said. Alexandra, do you have any other input on that as well?
Yes. Well, it is very important to have a very good data set. As we already talked about it, it's very important having people behind that, or a team working behind a project that is diverse. But diversity is also constantly changing, so it's also important to have or to include a lot of feedback processes to also improve the technology and to be updated more or less on the diversity inclusion topics. What today might be diverse and inclusive, is probably outdated by tomorrow. So it's also very important to have to keep in mind that to have that feedback processes.
Great. And there's one topic that I also wanted to go into, which is all about like founding a company. Basically, we have Karina, Gabi, and Isabel, who are the experts on founding, and Alexandra, who is the expert on the legal aspects. But I actually wish for more female startups, and I kind of just thought about buying the share of Bumble because she's a female, and I kind of like that. So my question for the audience as well is, how can we improve or like raise the number of female startups? Is it something that is it actually related to gender, or is it just like I don't know, what's your opinion on increasing Austrian or just like worldwide female startups in that point?
Well, if I may start, I guess what I often see is that females, they do take more feedback personally. So if something went wrong, it's because of them, you know, and this is untrue. And this, as an entrepreneur, especially, you go through all these things, meetings that are not positive, investment feedback, whatever. You go through it and you say, oh, maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe I'm not good enough, whatever. So I guess if this is managed and you say, and in my opinion and in my experience, men can do this much better. Hey, well, if he doesn't do it, if this doesn't do well, then I go somewhere else and try it again. Yeah. So having a much more I don't care attitude, if something goes wrong, is so important. And this brings you to the next stage and the next level and more and so on. And this is so important for entrepreneurs to really have this attitude. And this, if you have it, then women have a wonderful environment, because there's much support currently and there are much opportunities from any side. And you just have to get to this mindset and try it. And yes, there are other jobs. There is another way of living that is more easy. Yeah, being entrepreneur is tough at the end of the day, and you have to go through really death valleys and whatever. But it's worth it, because you can do so much for for yourself, for your own path, and for others. And I think it's worth it. And it's just coming through this. Hey, it's not your fault. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you fail once. Do it a second time.
Love it. Really amazing.
So for all women who are out there, I would like to give you a very good tip. So try it. If you have a good idea, try it. Find a very good business buddy and give them a call every day, in the evening maybe, or in the early morning, to encourage each other and to get some energy to get the next steps. So that's a very good way to encourage each other and be successful.
And also what I learned from the TED Talk, in case you have something before, like instead of getting nervous, just like raise your hands like a victory sign, which helps in the end as well.
There's a TED Talk today. Fake it until you become it, basically.
That's what I'm referring to. But looking at the time, we have 5 minutes left, and I know that there are questions on Slido. So I'll just take the first one. How do you feel the lack of women in AI is affecting the AI bias in applications? So think maybe, Gabi, do you want to go first on that? Because I think you also had some work related to bias and AI application development.
Yeah, so at the end, in that project we are involved, we can have a look on the data structure and help them to see if they are biased. But to be honest, most of the projects are running without us. And what we are doing is that we are on, like today, on panel discussions and bring in our perspectives and make sure that all who are in the or participate are get an idea how bad it is if you have biased data, because that's not a benefit of a company. If you have trained your very expensive AI model with biased data, and they are not sustainable for the next 2, 3, or 5 years because of the data, this is not a very very beneficial for the company, because it's costs you much of money.
Also the reputation.
And also the reputation, that's right, yeah.
Besides, and attracting women who want to come to work in your company then, yeah.
But also, like, answering this question, there are like tools as well outside that at least help to improve the bias in application, to check how well certain categories are involved, or if there is a certain decision made based on a group, for example, to just like make sure to kind of really, before like anything going in production, to kind of go through different people as well, receive feedback. And I think that's all like a loop in the end to kind of see it from various perspectives as well. Isabel, Alexandra, do you have any other inputs on the question?
Well, absolutely. I noticed from the various projects I was guiding and advising on that the lack of women in AI is it can be seen mostly in the field of HR, for example, where you use AI in the field of HR, because women tend to be a little bit more empathic and do have the right feeling on how to say something. I think about chatbots, how do they answer specific questions, and it's very essential to give them a little bit of flavor of the female touch also. because these are the most relevant fields where also women are working successfully in.
So I see no more questions. Well, is there women in AI Asia as well? It's globally, so women in AI is represented globally. Just make sure to join womeninai.co. So as Karina also said, there are more than 6,000 members. And maybe in case there's no ambassador for your country, you can also reach out to the global organization to kind of make sure to bring the organization back as well to your country. And then, yeah, just go for it, plan events, grow the community, and do whatever you would like to kind of do. So we have 2 minutes left. I would kindly ask like every one of you to I don't know, say some closing words and also some advice that you would give or hand over to the people attending. And yeah, thank you for that.
So may I start? I would say see AI as a new colleague. So he needs to be trained. He needs to get his perspective of the business model of the company, and yeah, he needs some time to grow. And maybe you can help him to grow and give them a very balanced perspective.
Well, my last words or advice in a nutshell, be confident, don't be afraid to take decisions, just do it. And just, yeah, know when to ask for help. It's okay to get help when you don't know how to move forward. Thanks.
Yes, I think AI is a unbelievable opportunity for the future. And as we heard in talks at the AAIC conference before, it's a multi-trillion market. So please, let's all join this opportunity and get the best out of it, and let's try it out and try things and contribute to the work and to society at the end of the day.
So hard to follow all these inspiring closing remarks. So I would quote Nelson Mandela, who actually said, "Your playing small doesn't serve the world." And I think that's what we should all believe in. So it's better to just try, just do it, as Alexandra said, and just give it a try, the new opportunities that AI brings for all of us. And make sure to get it right for all of us, because it only works if it works for us all. And just to say that everyone can join, because I saw the question before, so everyone can join the organization. So there is no limitation to genders or your profession. It's all about the idea of making AI work for us all and pushing for more equal society and using AI to create this world we want to live in. Thank you. Thank you for the very nice closing. And with that, I just hand it over to Clemens again.
Yeah, thank you very much for the panel and also for taking so many questions from the audience. Yeah, this will definitely not be the last collaboration we have. So look, can already spoiler the next event we will do together on gaming and AI in Silicon. So stay tuned for that one. But with regard to the time, unfortunately, we have to cut off now. So I wish you a nice, pleasant evening and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Best wishes from Vienna. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. And we will just quickly display our short video before we head over to our next session. So see you in a bit. that, and here we are again after a short break. And I'm really excited for our next session because we will be welcoming Roland Zhao from the Chinese startup 4Paradigm, which has actually been founded by amazing pioneers of the Chinese AI industry. Not to take too much away from the presentation, from the interview, which is hosted by my colleague Christian Hochreiter, our innovation officer at our Advantage Austria office in Beijing. For technical reasons, we have recorded the interview, which we will display to you right now. And after the interview, we will try and get a direct connection to Roland Zhao and Christian Hochreiter in China. Nevertheless, you can ask questions during this interview and after the interview, and we will be seeing us again for the live Q&A session in about 15 minutes. So enjoy the interview and talk to you in a bit. Roland Zhao, International Business Development Manager of 4Paradigm.
From the conference 2021. We're here in Beijing at the Advantage Austria office, and I'm together with Roland Zhao from 4Paradigm. Before we start the interview, I thought I'd set the scene with a few facts about the AI industry here in China. So China is widely considered as one of the most important innovators in the field of AI worldwide. So in the last 3 years, China has published the most patents in this field. And in terms of active AI companies, China is only second to the United States, with, as of 2019, roughly 1,200 active AI companies. The field is also backed by the government with a lot of relevant policies. For example, the action outline for promoting the development of big data and the next generation artificial intelligence development plan. And these kind of policies send an important signal to the stakeholders here in China, entrepreneurs, investors, or researchers, that artificial intelligence is a field that's worthy of time, of the money, because it's backed by the government. And so far it has yielded some impressive results. So there are some of the largest, most innovative AI companies are based in China. For example, SenseTime for computer vision, Unisound for speech recognition, Video++, which has an interesting technology where they can, in real time and dynamically put advertising within videos, place them in appropriate positions. And then there are also companies like Ant Financial and ByteDance that we would not associate with artificial intelligence usually, but they also make heavy use of this technology. And last but not least, there's also 4Paradigm, and we are really glad to have you here today. So let me start with asking you, what is 4Paradigm? What is it standing for, and what is it all about? Maybe you can give us a brief introduction.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Christian. I'm really glad to be here participating in the AAIC conference. So let me start introducing a bit more about 4Paradigm. So 4Paradigm is a full-spectrum artificial intelligence company. So we provide AI-related consulting services, tools, and algorithms to support enterprises who are seeking to transform their businesses with AI. Our company is founded in 2014. We have now grown to a team with about 700 employees, and we just completed our Round D fundraising of $700 million US. Many people ask why is our company called 4Paradigm, because it sounds like a very interesting name.
Why is that?
Yeah, and it actually comes from the work of Dr. Jane Gray, who is an American computer scientist and Turing Award winner in 1998. And he proposed that our human scientific learning process have gone through 3 stages in the past, being experimental, observational, and second being theoretical, and the third being computational with computer science. And now in the 21st century, we're in the data science stage. And in this 4Paradigm, we make use of huge volumes of data sets to make new discoveries. And that's how the name of the company comes from. So the role that 4Paradigm as a company want to take is to support companies to find direct values from the data that they own and generate. We often see that a common problem that companies might have is that there's simply too much complexity in the data set. And it's very difficult for a human business analyst to capture all of that value because there could be millions, trillions, or numbers of connections within and in between data sets. So here is where AI algorithms comes in, because AI can achieve a level of calculation complexity much higher than human beings. And 4Paradigm want to give companies that AI capability to be able to derive the hidden value within their data sets.
Okay, interesting. So basically, maybe tell us a little bit more about how for Paradigm started. What was your initial product? Mm-hmm. And then did you have to like pivot and change it over the years as you discovered maybe different ways of applying the product or like the technology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for Paradigm, it's a relatively young company. We're only 6 years old. Our CEO and founder, Dr. Dada Yuan, he was the principal architect for Baidu's AI system called Phoenix Nest. Another founder, Chen Yiqiang, he was the designer of ByteDance recommendation system, which is the developer of TikTok. Yeah. Another founder, Dr. Yang Qiang, he's the world's most cited AI scholar in the field of transfer learning, which is an emerging field of AI. So that founding team has a really strong academic thought leadership background, as well as experience applying AI in businesses. And actually from the beginning of their entrepreneurship, they're very clear that they don't just want to build a few AI solutions here and there for specific industries or specific business processes. They want to build AI platforms or a middle platform tool that empowers our client companies to have AI capabilities themselves, so that their AI or technical team can grow together with us with our first several projects, and eventually their team can build models themselves and react to new business scenarios, and apparently supported by the kinds of proprietary technology for Paradigm's AI platform.
Yeah, so maybe tell us a little bit more about the typical use cases that you see with your clients.
No problem. About our first couple of projects, so maybe we can start from there. Overall, Paradigm is industry agnostic, which means that we really get involved in a wide range of industries. But we started with finance and banking. And our first client was China's Merchants Bank, which is a global 500 bank and the world's top 10 most profitable bank. And we started with them in 2014-15. And at that stage, the banks hadn't really started implementing AI holistically into their business processes. And we select the specific scenarios of installment service precision marketing, just to see how AI models can perform better than their expert rules, pushing promotion messages to their potential customers. And then the result was actually really good. The average click-through rate and revenue increased by about 60%. And they're so happy with the result that they decided to really rethink their retail banking strategy, their credit card services. And then since then, they have been working with our team until now. And their AI model building process is built on for Paradigm's platform called Sage. I can also maybe talk about another example.
Absolutely, yes, please.
Yeah, so overall, if we look at all types of cases that we have, they're roughly in 3 categories. The first is customer engagement, which help our client companies create very customized experiences for their customers. So you really are providing 1,000 different products to 1,000 different customers. And the second type is risk management. So that includes anti-fraud transactions for banks, or predictive maintenance for manufacturing companies, or internal risk compliance control, etc. And the third type is operations, which is generally automation of processes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can give you an example that we have in the retail industry for customer engagement. We know that retail is really a hard-hit industry by the COVID-19 pandemic. And only in China, only those brands that has designed their online channels in a smart way were able to survive through the pandemic. And Young China, our client, which owns the KFC and Pizza Hut brands in China, is a good example of this. They now generate roughly about 84% of the revenue from online channels. Yeah, so how did AI help in their digital process? So for one thing, when you take your business online, your marketing process, your offline coupons and promotions turn into in-app digital coupons and promotions. And AI can enable precision marketing. And how does it do that? It means that you don't send one standard coupon to every customer at the same time, but you send very customized coupons with different amount of content to different people according to their various attrition risks, their demographics, their behavioral traits, and all those are calculated based on the data that you own for these customers. And in another example, the retail, the recommendation system we built for KFC can also generate personalized menus. And actually, if you only have an ordinary digital menu, because the average order value by customer can actually drop. And that is because the customer might find it annoying to browse through the long, complex menu themselves without in-person interaction with in-store assistant. Or they might just search for the specific things they have in mind when they open the app, and they don't get anything else, so that the AOV, the average order value, is lower. And AI comes in to help solve that problem. And so with the personalized menu, we rank those products that the customer might be most interested in on the top. We want to please and attract the customer, and at the same time promote your new products and services new products and meals that the customer hadn't seen before, so that we really optimize the experience for customers to make orders, and also provide the similar kind of interaction you would have with assistants, and in that way maximize your AOV.
Okay, interesting way to individualize the offerings. I thought maybe we can talk a bit about implementation. So it's interesting to hear these use cases, but I think it's also interesting to learn how, when you go to a company, how you start implementing these kind of projects. So how do you usually, when you talk to a client about implementing a new project, like walk us through the steps a little bit and what you typically tell clients, what they need to be aware of?
Yeah, definitely. To avoid the pitfalls of implementing AI, you definitely need to choose the right methodology.
Yeah.
And at Fourth Paradigm, we often engage with our clients who are the pioneers of their industry, and they are working with us to experiment new AI scenarios. So we have a specific methodology called 1+N for exploring new scenarios. So the 1 means the process of identifying a specific process where AI can really make a significant impact, even if it's only generating an incremental improvement as low as 1%. Okay. And in the case of KFC, their average order value has been increased by only about 2% after the model has been implemented. Okay. But that has been able to help them increase their revenue by hundreds of millions yuan. So that's an appropriate scenario for KFC in China. And then we move on to the N, which means to expand your AI model application to N number of processes, and that's considered holistically with the AI strategy and the digital transformation strategy that the organization have.
Okay.
And the common problem we see with proceeding to the N part is that there's simply not enough AI talents and resources to support your process, because we know that top AI talent is really rare at this stage. And developing a well-designed AI model can take as long as months. And
if you design it in-house, you mean?
Yeah, if you design it in-house without any external support or appropriate platform tools. And so that's why Fourth Paradigm promotes a platform strategy, because that platform can help engineers, even if they are not top AI talents, can help ordinary IT specialists to be able to complete the model development process in only weeks or even days. It compresses the process from data preparation to the design, the building, and the use of the AI models.
Okay. And typically, your contact person within the companies, are they more like the C-level people, or do you prefer to work closely with the operations team? Like, who would be your ideal vis-a-vis like a client's company that you want to talk to when you try to implement the projects?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually from both sides. And from the top down, you should see implementing AI as part of your corporate strategy. So that involves higher level people to get engaged. And from bottom up, it's definitely a collaboration between your IT team and all your relevant business specialists, business lines. So what we often recommend our clients to do is to assign a CAIO, a Chief AI Officer. Okay. And that person will be in charge of designing their AI strategies. Think about the relationship between AI and their overall business model. How do you integrate AI and a closed-loop data system into your overall tech infrastructure? How do you put together an AI team that's a combination of your internal employees and external support, supported by apply appropriate AI tools and platform, and how you acquire and make efficient use of your computing resources. So we consider it important to have that role either as a combination of internal and external people, or you dedicate one CIO of your organization to coordinate all that.
The way I understand it is like for implementing these projects, everyone needs to be on board from top management to like operational people, maybe even have a dedicated person in the company that helps to coordinate all these changes. Okay. In general, do you also have like other specific like suggestions for clients wanting to implement AI, what they should think about beforehand, or like any other like pitfalls or mistakes or issues that maybe they should be aware of like before you try to implement the project at all actually?
Yeah, I would say first, think about using AI as a corporate strategy rather than bringing a few AI solutions here and there in a scattered way. For sure, we know that AI is going to disrupt some industries, just like how the internet disrupted paper media decades ago. And so AI implementation is not only about getting a few models in, it's more a holistic design process. And so you need to think about where to start with, where to have your one, and how to expand your end scenarios in a more considerate way. And second, I would say, think about how you want to build your AI team, what kind of people you want to get involved, what kind of internal people should be there, and what kind of external support you might need, as well as the kinds of platform and tools. And that should be really balanced based on your evaluation of your existing processes and existing capabilities. And third, I would say when you actually started implementing AI, make sure to build your data system that's in a closed loop system. So your model is capable of continually improving itself by receiving feedback because you need to tell your model how well it did for itself to automatically react to new situations, and also make sure that you have planned your computing resources intelligently, because that can be a costly part. And for Paradigm, we promote a software hardware integrated solution to minimize your TCO, your total cost of operations.
Okay. Well, these were a lot of interesting insights. Maybe just the last quick question to wrap up. You were mentioning that for Paradigm is very like industry agnostic, so you're open to a lot of industries. But you mentioned retail and banking so far for use cases. Are there any other industries or use cases that you're looking forward, like in the future, to be like more engaged with and like solve issues in these other industries, like supply chain, for example? Or...
Yes, that's actually an area that we're looking at. We have realized our client requests have become more complex. So a supply chain scenario is actually one of those complex situations that involve a combination of high-level AI algorithms. So in the supply chain scenarios, we help clients decide how much they should produce each day and how many products we need to dispatch from the factories to their stores. How do they select the location of their stores? So the process, it's really a combination of many AI problems, and that involves machine learning, deep learning, reinforced learning, and environment learning, which is a very exciting problem for our AI engineers and scientists to look at.
Okay, great. And I believe our audience can also like reach out to you if they have more questions or want to discuss these issues in more detail. Thank you so much. It was very insightful. And back to you, Matthias. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, Matthias.
All right. Thank you so much, Christian and Roland. And now we see if we have actually a live connection to our Beijing office and to Roland Chow. Let's see. Hello, Christian. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Matthias.
Wonderful. Now live. And hello, Roland. Can you hear us as well?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Calling from Beijing. Really glad to meet everyone online in person.
Ni hao, Beijing.
Really great to meet in real life, as I always say, because this is really our life in the last year, virtual conferences. And thank you so much for your input. We received many comments and some questions that we want to have a look at together now. So let's pull them up for a second. And well, let's start with the first one. Your co-founders are AI pioneers. Do they still have active roles at For Paradigm?
Yes.
And maybe that question is to you, Roland. Maybe you can. Did you?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not the person in charge of tracking our co-founders' daily tasks, but absolutely they're very engaged in the daily decision making. And I often see our founder, Dr. Daiwen Yuan, in one of our meeting rooms, actively thinking about what's the next steps for AI applications and in various business scenarios in China. And also our co-founders, a lot of them have very deep academia background, so they also lead our research and develop teams to constantly develop new models that to meet the challenge of complex business scenarios.
So still developing and researching. It's amazing because they have been actually really involved in so many famous names that we know from the AI industry in China that you mentioned in your interview. And let's see, we have the next question. Well, somebody asks, do you have a consulting or sales team in Europe or the US?
Yeah, correct. So actually, we started our international team in Europe at the start of 2020, right before the pandemic, actually. And because of that, our expansion has been slow but steady. And we are actually now really looking forward to connect with clients or partners in Europe and US to explore the market together. And we do realize that as we have strong technology and products that has been through many implementations in China, the market situation and demand outside of China would be very different. And we respect the experiences of our existing, of the partners and the market leaders there in Europe to work together and see how we can best leverage AI.
Because we heard so many times today that implementing AI has to do a lot with having a perfect understanding of both domains of the business that you're working with and of the AI services you're developing.
Yeah,
interesting.
And also to add, we understand that there are certain requirements that comes from the European market. So, for example, we have taken the effort to make sure that our Sage AI platform complies with the GDPR requirements of Europe. And so, in terms of identity and access management, we have made sure that our product is designed in a way that protects users' privacy. And we really respect that and think that's fundamental to any of our activities in Europe.
Oh, that's anyway something I would also have wondered about. Thank you. So GDPR compliant data handling. Another question that we have, well, a similar direction. Your role is international business development. In which regions has For Paradigm so far expanded?
So we have 5 offices globally and have 2 international offices, one in Singapore covering the APAC region and Southeast Asia, and one covering EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is based in Amsterdam. So currently those are the regions that we are prioritizing at the moment, and we are very open to having discussions with either resellers or solution partners or IT providers who might be thinking about how to strengthen their own solutions with AI, or maybe we can collaborate on projects together.
Maybe one follow-up question to this one on your international locations. Do you also have international engineering teams? Or is it purely sales and consulting?
So our research and development teams has its presence in Singapore at the moment, and we have started thinking about collaborations with local universities. The progress in Singapore office has had a little more progression since the pandemic, but we really hope that we can still either operate and enable our corporations from long distance, or be able to survive, be able to really get over the pandemic and get more actions taken in Europe as well.
There's actually a similar question to yours, Clemens, in the chat. How many employees do you have? And how international is your staff? Maybe like percentage-wise.
Okay, statistically, yes. Yeah. So overall, we have over 700 employees. A majority of them are in Beijing, now headquartered in Beijing, about 500 are in Beijing. And I think internationally, it's not a huge, it's definitely not a huge proportion, and a majority of staff still in China. But we're looking to expand our international team. And many of our staff has studied abroad, and so they're aware of the business and the market needs abroad could be drastically different from the China market. And I think with those back knowledge, we would definitely be really open to hiring more local talents and to integrate our business models with the local ecosystem to work together with universities or organizations and to explore the best way forward and grow our team.
Well, one organization that definitely keeps on working with you is our Advantage Austria office in Beijing, connecting Austria and Chinese companies. We are already at the end of our time slot, but I want to thank you so much for your input. Roland and Christian, we wish you a nice evening and an enjoyable weekend, and hope you are still available for maybe some contact requests that come over our B2Match meeting platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Please feel free to reach out to me and we can have more conversations afterwards. Thank you, Clemens and Matthias and Christian.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Good evening to Beijing.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, it's really back on back today, but Clemens, we have one of the highlights saved up for the last and fourth day of our conference.
Oh, yes.
Who will be joining us?
Indeed. So it's our special pleasure that for the last day of the conference, we could convince Sepp Hochreiter.
You convinced him.
Yeah,
yes.
Majestic plural. to join us. And I mean, it goes without saying that Sepp is in the Western Hemisphere definitely, or in general, one of the most famous and impactful researchers in the field, with papers dating back to the 90s or most recently with Rudder. And Sepp agreed to, on the one hand, show us like what is currently going on in AI trends, but equally important, also on a European level, he will talk about ELLIS, the research network of excellence centers for AI, where Linz is also one of the outposts there. And to give a little bit insight on this, what is going on a European level. So I think we already see him here. So
yes,
welcome.
Let's see if we have a connection.
Hello, Sepp.
Hello and welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Perfect. Picture works, sound works.
Perfect. Should I start to share my screen or?
Yes, you can start to share your screen at any time, and as soon as we have the presentation, we put it on stage.
Yep. So if you press on present mode, we flip it on.
Perfect. And here we already got something.
Yeah.
We will see each other in a few minutes for the Q&A session. To our audience, please feel free to reach out to Professor Hochreiter in the chat on Slido. We will ask him your questions, the most popular ones, in the end. So, see you in a bit. The floor is all yours.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about ELLIS and what is building up in Europe these days. ELLIS stands for European Laboratory for Learning and Intelligent Systems. I have problems to switch to go forward. I'm trying it again. Now it's working. A background of ELLIS. Machine learning, as you know, is at the heart of the technological and societal AI revolution. What you read in newspapers, it's all driven by machine learning or deep learning. But problem, most of the stuff you're reading is from Facebook, Google, and so on, meaning Europe is not keeping up. Most of the famous research labs are located in America, in the West or East Coast. It's not only the research, all good PhD schools in the States. On the other hand, if we look at the money, AI investments are mostly done, or the high sums are done in China and in America. And these investments are significantly higher than what we see in Europe these days. Therefore, academic institutions are struggling to retain their best scientists. It's the same with my guys. Either they go to Google or Facebook, they get a good offer, or they go to Enlight AI, also a very famous company. And it's hard to keep these guys at academia. And what also is developing, it's getting more attractive for these guys to leave academia, because the distinction between academic research and the industrial labs, if you think about these Google Brain labs, is vanishing. There's not so much difference anymore. Perhaps there's a difference. Industrial labs have much more compute and more women power to do the big experiments. That's the situation we perceive in Europe. Everything is scattered. You see these islands. We have these universities, and within the universities, this machine learning or AI groups, but nothing is connected. Nothing is organized. There's no common movement how to coordinate AI research in Europe. And this should change. I hope this will change. And it started with the ELLIS letter. There was a proposal. It was in April 2018. The idea was labs, which outstanding facilities and a good track record, should be able to recruit the top scientists. Don't leave them go to the States or China. Don't leave them move into industry. We also need good research. It comes with a high hiring bar. We want to have the best ones. Here, excellence is priority. We also think about long-term funding, competitive salaries. Even we now have to compete with industry. Low teaching duties. If you always stand in your classroom, you cannot do high-level research. Also, build up the connection to startups. Fostering startups should be facilitated. And we want to go together and do joint recruitments and evaluations across whole Europe. And also, it's about fellows and students across Europe. Let's do things together, workshops, summer schools, or PhD programs. That was written in this proposal. It was the first step towards we now see as ELLIS. The idea was to establish something which is similar to EMBL. EMBL is a European Molecular Biology Laboratory with some locations across Europe. And it's a really high prestige organization, and most of the biological or biotechnology research is done at these labs, and they're very well-funded, have good output concerning research. And then in December 2018, at the NeurIPS conference in Montreal, you see the guys here, the ELLIS Society was founded. This was a founding meeting, very early for Americans, but a good time for us Europeans. And this is a photo of the guys who signed the ELLIS Society Foundation, who did the first step towards founding the ELLIS initiative. Now, here ELLIS is already established. Here's the ELLIS board. the board members with Barbara, Nuria, Bernhard, and Max, and deputy members Matthias, Andreas, myself, and Josef. What's going on within ELLIS? What we want to do, what are our goals, aims, and so on. These pillars, first of all, attract and enable the best minds. We want to make research positions within Europe attractive. And the idea is talent breeds talent. Good people draw other good people, educate other high-level researchers, and we want to keep talent within Europe. So second pillar would be create a regional ecosystem around leading AI research groups or institutions. The ecosystem should comprise startups, new companies who want to go into this topic AI research, established industry companies locally which want to use AI and in particular machine learning, but also academia and all institutions from society. So I should come together and move forward AI research and research in machine learning. The third pillar is bring Europe's leading AI hotspots together. You saw there were these scattered islands. Why not working together? Why not making a strong brand? Why not be proud to be in Europe and doing good research and doing a good application of AI and machine learning? And then if also industry and startups, if this ecosystem exists here, then we can keep also good scientists, we can keep everything. And what we invent, we can directly apply, we can directly bring it into products, we can bring it into some markets, we can create more. Here, ELLIS mission, it's about Europe. There should be the best basic research. We are already very strong in basic research. We want to keep this, but we want to go one step ahead, one step further, also brings this basic research into industry, into SMEs. So I want to should pick up these new technologies to improve their processes, their workflows, their marketing strategies, whatever. We want to enable Europe to shape modern AI. Modern AI, it's machine learning, it's deep learning. And modern AI is changing the world. We want to be part of it and not only be observers, not only let America or China do everything. We also want to have a voice. We also want to be part of this world-shaping technology, deep learning, machine learning. And I already mentioned it, build a local ecosystem for machine learning, meaning we should have different locations, a grid across Europe where every company has some very good research institution connected to ELLIS nearby to get advice, to get newest information, the newest technologies, and to get pushed forward. We also are aiming at having with these new technologies a positive social and economic impact. We want to help society, but also want to have economic effects, positive effects. For example, we want to create new jobs in Europe, create new businesses, want to bring in new technologies in already established businesses and companies. How it's implemented, what we already have done, what's right now. we have here the three main pillars. ELLIS Fellows Program, LHPD and Postdoc Program, and ELLIS Sites. I will go through all these three pillars. ELLIS Fellow Programs. First of all, ELLIS Fellows, you see this is marked in green, spread across Europe. In light green, you see where the only members. Fellows are the senior scientists, the high-ranked scientists. Members are scientists which participate in this top-tier conferences. And then there are supporters. For supporters, you don't have an excellence bar. You can be always supporters. Supporters, it's only in yellow. And it's colored in, if there's a fellow, you get the green. If there's a member but no fellows, then you get light green. And if there's only supporters, you get the yellow. And you see, we already covered Europe very well. Some gray spots we see in Eastern Europe and so on. But it's well developing. We are growing. We are growing fast. Perhaps we're growing too fast. Objectives for this fellow initiative, for this fellow ELLIS Fellow program. We want to bring together the best scientists, senior scientists within Europe in AI machine learning. It's not only machine learning, it's also related fields like vision, robotics, and natural language processing, stuff like this. It's not only core machine learning, but also all these application fields. We want to bring together the best scientists in our field. They should talk to each other. In the fellow programs, we want to focus the research on high impact problems to use these modern technologies, modern AI, machine learning, deep learning, to solve urgent problems we have identified. We want to focus on really important problems and not some niches where we cannot make a difference. Also, this fellow program is inspired by the CIFA program. It's a Canadian program. This Canadian program was very successful, where Joshua Benjo is a leading scientist, but also Jeff Hinton initialized this. And CIFA is a role model for us. And we also collaborate with CIFA. CIFA also gave us the first inputs, the first reviews for the fellows. It's about fellows. Again, fellows. We want to enable an intensive scientific exchange. All these islands I showed you should work together. We identified important research areas, important application areas, and also guys should work together. And this across institutions, across countries, and so on. And these fellow programs, the research is dedicated to relevant topics. Here I list some of them. It's of course basic research, the theory and the algorithms behind machine learning, deep learning, but also application areas like health and life sciences, and also very active right now, climate and earth sciences. Also, I don't know whether you know that Linz is leading in models for hydrology, models for climate change. Even Google is financing research in Linz because application of machine learning, AI, climate and earth science, we have the lead here. And also human-centric AI, there are fellow programs, research programs on this. Here is the list of the fellow programs, the research program. There's geometric deep learning. It's about graph neural network stuff like this, but also equivalent stuff, robust machine learning, interactive learning, and interventional representations. This is also causality. It's also covering reinforcement learning, machine learning, computer vision. That's basically computer vision group. Robot learning. That's the robotics guys. Human-centric machine learning. That's what I already mentioned. Then the core theory, algorithm, and computations of modern learning systems. Quantum machine learning and physics-based machine learning. It's a very, very active field, also quantum computing, using quantum computers for machine learning. Natural intelligence, which gives the connections towards cognitive science, towards neuroscience. ELLIS Health, we are also part of ELLIS Health. Everything what has to do with health, bioinformatics, and using AI systems in medicine or health systems. Machine learning in earth and climate science, I already mentioned it. Natural language processing, and also symbolic machine learning, which is more so connections to the traditional AI, like it was rule-based systems, expert systems, and stuff like this. We also include that. This shows the ELLIS fellows and scholars. Fellows are the senior researchers, scholars, very high-level researchers, but they don't have the seniority, which only is measured how long is your PhD passed. And these are fellows and scholars. These are best researchers here in Europe, and you see it's going across Europe. What is shown here, the numbers tell you how many fellows per 10 million citizens. And what you see is Switzerland has a high rate, there's a high density in Switzerland of good researchers, but also in Israel, it's a bottom right, you see it, and UK. This is what we see. Also Finland has a very high number, but all other numbers are quite distributed. We have about 280 fellows, but they're increasing. Right now, I think we have, it's going towards 400 because each fellow, if you want to become a fellow of the ELLIS network, you have to go into a review process, and only if you get across a bar by meeting all the criteria, you become a fellow or a scholar in this thing. And here, Austria, we were very successful. For example, I came to this with the ELLIS units. Austria could initiate 2 ELLIS units. It's in Ist of the Institute of Tom Hansinger, in Klosterneuburg, and in Linz, which was quite surprising for all other countries that Austria is so strong in AI to get 2 units accepted, while in Germany there are only few more. Switzerland only gets 1, and also Cambridge and Oxford could not make it in the first round. So I made it in the second round. I'm still at the ELLIS Fellows. What is the goal of an ELLIS Fellow? It's about to promote and exchange ideas, to create a European community of top AI researchers, and also think about new developments, new trends in AI, what's going on in the research field. Very important, retain and attract talent. We want to keep talent in Europe, and we also want to draw them to Europe. Also, what is the role of ELLIS? To advance science, of course, and also act as an ambassador of ELLIS. What I'm doing right now, telling what's ELLIS about, bringing ELLIS to everybody, to companies, people, and so on. Also to provide strategic advice and leadership within Europe, especially in the local ecosystem, and also stand up and fight for European interests, and also generate international visibility of European researchers. And the fellows, it's very focused on excellence. Here we see the median age index of fellows, it's 53. There are other AI organizations, but ELLIS isn't focused on excellence. We want to have the best researchers, and the best researchers team up with industry, the best researchers team up with startups, the best researchers try to make PhDs, get the best guys into the PhD programs. It's about excellence. The next pillar, that was about the fellow program, is the ELLIS PhD and postdoc program. It's clear, it's about education. We want to keep the best and smartest young researchers in Europe. And that means attract and support excellent young researchers in machine learning. And we also want to coordinate all graduate programs, also PhD programs across Europe by meta program, because the PhD can only be given by university, but we can coordinate. We put on top an ELLIS program. The best PhD students should be ELLIS PhD students. And that's a European collaboration. And again, the focus is on excellence. Also in the PhD program, we want to get the best ones. They should not go to MIT. They should not go to Stanford. They should be stay in Europe and work with us and push forward these technologies. The idea is for the PhD doing joint supervision within the ELLIS network. Joint supervision means you have supervised as a PhD student from 2 different countries. And we want to become the #1 brand for PhD, for education in machine learning and AI. The program is already set up. There's joint supervision. For the joint supervision, you need 1 fellow or scholar, one of these high-level guys, and a second one, which is fellow scholar or can be member. Member means you basically publish in the main conferences. And there should be collaboration and exchange. There's the academic track where you stay for 6 months in another academic institution abroad. You have to go to another country. And here, very interesting, we also established the industry track. In the industry track, you also have to stay 6 months within the industrial partner. You have to be in the company for 6 months. And the nice thing is the company don't have to be in another country, can be in the same country, but what still applies, the second supervisor in the company, you have to be a member. You have to have a member in your company, and then you can be part of a PhD program where the guys are 6 months in your company. The only requirement is 50% of the time it should be in academia, because academia is giving us a PhD degree. For this PhD program, you have a central recruiting system in place. This is once per year. It was in December for PhD positions where all the guys around the world can apply, and then we make a matching process. Perhaps the PhD positions in ETH, Zurich, or Cambridge are already full, and then these guys can go to Linz, to Tübingen, to Berlin, or whatever. There's a second track where you can enter the ELLIS PhD program, and that's by nomination of advisors. The advisors have to be a fellow or scholar, and then you can directly enter this ELLIS PhD track. But still, the rules apply. You have to stay 6 months. Soon it would become 1 year abroad. If you're in academia or for industry, you have to be 6 months also in the company. Currently, we have 41 PhD students and postdocs in this track. We had the first central recruiting where we had 97 ELLIS fellows which served as advisors, and these fellows came from 16 different countries and 70 different institutions, and we got PhD applications. So there, I think it was 1,600 applicants from 70 different nationalities. It's China, India, Russia, everything you can think of. Also South Americas, South and North America. Now I'm going very shortly into the last pillar of the ELLIS. It's the ELLIS sites, it's the ELLIS units. The ELLIS units, Linz is the ELLIS unit in Austria, and in close to Neuburg, East is the other ELLIS unit right now. And this is the nuclei of scientific excellence. Here, the top researchers are located. Also, this ELLIS units serve as ambassadors or as persons in the ELLIS units for ELLIS. There's the anchor of ELLIS locally. You have local units, all companies, social institutions have access, local access. They should be active scientific contributors, so in science, and collaborators within the ELLIS network. They are well connected, but there's a local anchor. We have many local anchors that everybody has access to the ELLIS network because of this local ELLIS units. That should be leadership within their local ecosystems, in terms of machine learning, deep learning, AI, and they're working on the national level. Here, this ELLIS unit should create working environments, research environments where the top talents don't go to the America or China, but stay here and say they can do nice research and can work here. And we want to get a critical mass of excellent people, also to be visible, really to change something. Also, ELLIS units should support startups in industry and also society. So as these local anchors of ELLIS, everybody should have access to ELLIS via these local units. These are the units which were already established. This is 30 ELLIS units. Linz, here's Vienna, it's actually close to Neuburg. So there were two, in the first chart, two Austrian units, which was a big surprise for everybody, that Austria is in the lead in AI. Nobody was expecting that. If you look at the ELLIS units in terms of computer rankings, this is 20 top ranked institutions in terms of computer science. And all these institutions have ELLIS units. You see them in yellow. Only few of them are right now not part of the ELLIS network. And we have different committees. I very fast switch over this. There's a fellow committee. Everything is reviewed by top researchers. Nothing is like, because you know somebody, you get in. Now everything is about excellence, and you have to go through a review process. Also for the units, there's a side committee, PhD committee, also diversity committee, because we want to bring in both more women and also more variety across countries and ethnic groups. And that's a coordination office. And with this, I would stop, and I'm here for questions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. We received a couple of questions, and we want to dive right into the questions we received on LinkedIn. This was quite early in the presentation, so let's see. How do we get more European VCs and the wider investor community to invest more in AI startups? We lack substantially. What do you think about this question?
Yeah, but first of all, I have to say, probably it's not my expertise, but there's, I will answer this question wider. I give you an example. I was in the States. I met some guy and asked the guy, "What are you doing?" "Yeah, I'm working at McDonald's." And then we were talking with the guy, and later it turned out, he's studying electrical engineering. If I go and meet somebody in Austria and say, "What you're doing?" "Yeah, I'm studying electrical engineering." And after some time, the guy would say, "Yes, and I'm working at McDonald's." So mindsetting was different. If you ask them, thinking about how can they make money, how can they do something. And also here, if you invent something in Austria, if you invent something in Europe, perhaps you can become professor. "Hey, now I can become professor." If you invent something in Silicon Valley, you said, "Hey, now I can found a company, I can make a company, I can make money." So mindset is different, and that's a problem. Because the mindset is different, also the money flow is different. In the States, if you have ideas, the guys in the mindset immediately give you money to build it up. And here you have to go to committees, another committee, and you have to fulfill this and that. It's ridiculous. So guys don't give you money. They want to make sure that you're successful. It's a different culture. That's what I'm saying. The culture is different. Therefore, I don't know how to improve this. And this have to be improved from the guys who give the money, but it also have to be improved from the guys who start something. If you cannot rewire the brains, it doesn't work. But also our system in Europe is advantages. I'm not sure whether we should imitate what's going on in the States.
So this is a deeper rooted answer to that question that probably is too short. We have too short of time to get into that probably, but it's a lot to do about culture, mindset.
Yes, just 1 second, because Ruth is obviously studied the ELLIS homepage.
Yes.
And it's very good that she brought up the topic of the open call that ELLIS is running at the moment. So we will distribute this afterwards also to all participants. It's the call specifically aimed at SMEs.
Perhaps I should say, look into this now for some company startups. You get some money and also scientific advice to get in your technology. Take it. It's a big opportunity to kickstart your business.
Excellent. So now we head back to the Slido question.
Let's see, we are a little bit over time, so maybe we just take 1 or 2 of the most popular ones. I think you answered the first one. How do you want to attract talent to Europe? Because you mentioned that you have a similar approach like the Canadian CFAR program, I think.
Yep.
Do you want to add something to that? How do you want to attract talent to you?
No, I already said this is a Pillows fellow program, PhD program, and the units put all our money onto excellence. We want to be excellent, and there keep all the guys here and attract them here.
Oh, the next question is actually one. Oh, that's nice. A personal question. How did your passion for AI start in the beginning?
That's AI was for me neural networks. I studied computer science in Munich, but it was really boring. I didn't go to the classes anymore because it's so boring and trivial. And I was more in beer garden. If you don't know what beer garden is, check it in internet. And then I stumbled over interesting stuff. It was some practical work in neural networks. And also there, Jürgen Schmidhuber came into the game. And there, the first time I saw something, hey, it's not things which are known for 50 years. There's new thing you can try out. You can get your mind in, you have new ideas. And that was interesting. So that was the first interesting stuff, because all other things was old stuff, 50 years old, and there was nothing new to discover. And neural networks was really new and cool.
Great. Thanks for pointing this out in such a vivid way. I must say, up to the beer garden, we share the same CV. Just afterwards, the path somehow diverged.
Probably you didn't met Jürgen at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, this brings us to the end of this session. really, thanks a lot for joining us, and also especially on such a short notice. We will make sure to distribute everything you talked just now, the presentation, to the participants, and also the call to action for the SME call that is out. And yeah, we would be more than happy to welcome you or one of your fellow ELLIS members on one of our next events again. So really, thanks a lot to Linz and for taking the time, Sepp.
Okay, yes. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
And have a good time. Stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Great. Well, and today, really back on back, we have now something that we have been waiting for all week, and let's get it on.
Yeah,
Clemens.
let's get it started. I mean, 2 days ago, for those of you that have joined the session, there was already the introduction of the AAIC Hackathon. So for the first time, we're carrying out a hackathon in parallel to the AAIC. The hackathon is run by Left Shift 1. So you also know from yesterday from the Ecosystem Day. Then Atos, I think no one in Europe needs explanation who Atos is, and from Sclable. Sclable, you definitely know from the AAIC Logistics. And these three companies agreed to, let's say, carry out the hackathon together with selected companies. We did not open it up completely because it was sort of a trial run, but it's companies from the entire DACH region. And today we have with us Dr. Judith Dada from Atos, Patrick Hochreiter, the CEO of Left Shift 1, and Dr. Charles Dietz, the head of AI and lead data scientist at Sclable. And they will give us a walkthrough about the results and also show the specific cases which have been carried out over the course of the last couple of days. So yeah, without further hesitation, I hand over to the three masters of ceremony.
Thank you, Clemens. I think, Patrick, you are going to share our slides.
Yes, he did. Wait, let me pull them up. All right.
All right. Thank you very much. Good morning. Still good morning in some countries. Good afternoon. Good evening. Great to have you again back to our presentation of the results of our hackathon. I think now it's time to lift the curtain to show you what we have done the last 3 days together with our partners and also with the company. I think I can obviously say it was really work, our team delivered here, but on the other hand, also for sure, much fun. I think it made fun, all of them, combined with hard work. To give you a baseline, what was it about and what happened the last 3 days, we will have in our session on Wednesday. We started with 4 companies from different industries, manufacturing, public institution, food and beverage, startup company. So I think this was the baseline to have 4 different companies, which makes it quite interesting because 4 companies means 4 use cases, 4 different use cases. I think this was the challenge to have 4 companies with 4 different use cases, 4 different baselines, bring all this together and to do this hackathon. And I think part of it was now to have these 4 companies, 4 use cases, 4 mixed teams. We had teams coming from the companies, from the clients, from Atos, Left Shift 1, Scalable, put all these people together in 4 teams, in 4 project teams finally, and to deliver something. To deliver something really in this just 3 days. I think this is really amazing what you can do in just 3 days with the right people, the right team on board. And if you can pull everything together and say, what was it, what we delivered, I think it's clear, a success. And this is what we will show to you in the next few minutes. All of these 4 MVPs were delivered successfully. The companies, I think, are pretty happy what they have seen and what they have got out of the hackathon, and finally what they can bring back to their companies. Because the goal was to really develop and implement something the companies can use and industrialize for themselves in their home environment. And now let's get started. To make it really short and simple, let's start with the first use case from Bessemer, manufacturing company, and show to you what we delivered there. Philip?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Patrick, if you switch to our slides. Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. So we are basically in the IT field where we try to make ticketing smarter the handling of it. So the goal is to speed up the process of who gets which ticket. So how does the use case look like? So basically, their email comes to the system. It can be in any of the languages, many languages, and our goal is to classify the email in one or more labels. So it's a multi-class, multi-label. So it could be two things simultaneously in the same time. And if you go to the next slide, I can show you how it looks like. So basically, the data comes as an email. It says something like, "Hello, Adam. Hope everything is fine. X broke. How should we proceed? By the way, wouldn't it be nice if we updated the system by something? Best regards," etc., etc. Some signatures, some other emails maybe attached. So you can already see that the data is very messy, right? You can see some typos. You can see some unnecessary information with the greetings and the footer, the signature. So all this comes to is in our data set. So we spent some time for pre-processing and figured out how to extract the most important information of this incoming message. And then we take this message, classify it. For example, here we said, okay, it's a new feature request and a replacement order, just to see how it works. So that's the solution. And in the next slide, I can show you a little bit more about what we tried and what we did. So basically, we made a baseline, some educated random guessing. Then we tried some more of the classical feature engineering approaches with TF, IDF, and some methods, models like support vector machine or random forest. We also played around with the more newer approaches and state-of-the-art approaches with the neural networks, with embeddings and transformer, for example, BERT. We also tried to automatize the spelling correction or the translation. And at the end, we achieved the results which are 10 times better than a baseline. We're quite happy with the preliminary results, which were just done after a couple of hours of training. And we will continue working on this in future because it can save a lot of time and can be used in many different companies and fields. So it doesn't need to be manufacturing. It could be anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next use case is from Charles. Maybe you can start.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me well? Very well. So the next use case was brought to us actually by the University of Graz. It's called the Smart Exam Planning System. So what they need basically, it's a whole new system that helps them planning and scheduling the exam sessions that takes place at the end of the semester. So I think for people a bit more familiar with operation research, it's one of these classical scheduling planning problem, which is not new, but which is still always difficult to handle for reasons that we will see. I'll show the next slide. So what was exactly the motivation from the University of Graz regarding this? First, I mean, generally, they would like to improve the experience that the users, actually, their students have over the semester when going through the applications to the course and to the exams, and having also better scheduling. There's also an underlying goal, which is also to try to improve the sustainability of the campus life and campus operations, which is related to how you allocate certain resources. And also the process itself is still largely taking place manually. It's done by many different parties. It's done at a central level, by central administration. It's done by the institutes. The resources themselves are also distributed. There are several layers distributed in different ways, also like large shared resources and small locally available resources. And also usually by the end of the semester, just before exam session, they'll have to deal with lots of last minute changes, which are again always handled manually. So it's very tricky process, especially from a perspective of user experience. And of course, the interesting underlying goals would like to see how could you maximize actually eventually the attendance of the exams and courses and see if potentially is related to actually the success rate. Of course, there is a stake there. So, but for the hackathon, we have very real practical problems. The project, the problem was not so very well specified, and you see it's pretty very huge thing. And also were delivered data which did not exactly support the simple possible solution we could think of in the beginning. So what we do? Next slide. The first thing we did is to not panic And then basically during the and follow, you know, good usual method, and which actually was played in 2 tracks. So on one hand, there was data scientists from Atos and myself. We work all along with the customer directly to do the ideation and a more detailed scoping of the problem. So we try to identify what are the user groups, the high-level requirement needed for this solution. I already try to drive a high-level sort of solution and also a little bit of vision, you know, long-term vision of how these project and system could be like for the several years to come. And also try to assess the project. But as I say, there are some very, very hard problems. Underlying first, the technical problem itself is difficult, but also the user acceptance is extremely critical for a problem like that, that we know from experience. And then on the parallel track, actually a data scientist and a software engineer from LSTM were actually, based on the very early understanding we had of this use case, try to prototype a solution. So as mentioned, they had the problem that the data were not exactly suited for even the simplest formulation of that problem. So what they did is basically mock some of the data, simulate some extra data sets so they can work on and try to implement a prototype of a solution. And they went pretty far actually. So they simulated some data, they actually designed a quick prototype of a planning engine and then integrated and deployed it along with the AIOS suite for MLOps. So they had, I don't have a very nice visual there, but I have like a little pipeline where basically the conditions are met, the scheduling is done, and then the final schedule is being sent by email or provided to a PDF to the users. So that's how far we went. Next slide. So overall, what are the results, the deliverable? A much better scoping of the use case, better definition of the problem and risk assessment. We provided to the investigator a set of IDs and recommendations in order to move on with the project. And of course, there was this prototype made with iOS that was delivered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Then Craig, your turn.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Patrick. Our third use case was focused on automating the report generation in the area of pet healthcare. So Aniveri, the company we were working with in the past 3 days, offers the possibility to check a pet's health status based on animal hair analysis and combined with a questionnaire to collect additional information like the breed, the age, the size, and the weight, and tons of additional parameters of the pet. This enables Aniveri to create health recommendations and a nutrition plan. The evaluation of the data and the creation of a corresponding health report usually takes about 30 minutes per animal. So this is where AI comes in. During the last 72 hours, an engine was developed to read and to link the available data and to create this health recommendation and nutrition plan automatically. And this just in a few seconds. This report is not just created and thrown over the fence to the animal keepers. There's always the human in the loop, and Aniveri is able to review the report and, of course, adapt the report before it's been getting finally created and sent to the customers. But if this report can be created manually, why are we doing this with the AI? The answer is quite simple, because it enables Aniveri to concentrate on what is their conviction and passion, and this is that your animal is doing well. By collecting and processing larger amounts of data, and this is what we enable them now, the accuracy of the recommendations can be continuously improved, and by enriching this data with additional information like geographical or environmental influences, it also gives a lot of new possibilities. So the next step would be to develop an AI model that, for example, enables identification of deviations or recognizes regional peculiarities or inflections due to diet or exercise you do with your animal. The list of things to explore is very, very long. We have a lot of ideas already discussed with Aniveri, and we are proud to be part of the journey we are doing with Aniveri. And while talking about the journey, let's move on to the last use case we had in the hackathon. Patrick, may I hand over to you?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Now let's look at the last use case, prediction food and beverages recommender. So 8 out of 10 products in this area are not listed in the supermarket in the long term and disappear from the market again. So, however, these products still must be produced in small quantity and costs money in production, marketing, logistics, and so on. So go-to-market is a physical test market in Vienna and in Frankfurt and test new products in their stores. Here we have the data from sales, ingredients, packaging, demographical data from the customer. And the test customer fills in questionnaires. And what is the challenge? Can AI predict the likelihood of purchase based on demographics data from the input data? And can AI explain the reason why this product was bought? Yeah, yes, we can. So we analyzed 25 chocolate bars by using AI. 5 deep learning models were developed for each chocolate bar in 72 hours. And as well as explainable AI models. The result was with an accuracy of 96%. We can use AI to identify in the first step which persona buys which item and what were data mining the features for the purchase. So as can be seen in the example, the age, origin, regional references, health are data mining features for the chocolate bar. Basically, with a natural intelligence, we can make this connection ourselves. But if we can't prove anything, you have to believe everything. By using AI, we can now prove on this basis of data that there is a connection between these data. So the next steps are to link the AI models in the AI operating system with the CRM system, Odoo, and the GS1 data. Secondly, to support the surveys with a digital assistant. And the last, we will expand the product portfolio and the data diversity. And yeah, let's bring me to the end. Thank you very much for this 72 hours at Atos, Left Shift 1, for the employees, also Kleber. I think it was fun. Thank you very much to our customers as well. Thank you to Clemens and Matthias for the possibility that we can do that. And hopefully we could show some other company it's possible to do things in a very, very short time to evaluate what is possible with AI. Yeah. If you want to connect us, please at LinkedIn. And yeah, now I'm handing over to Clemens and Matthias. Thank you very much.
So yeah,
congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. Hooray. I wish you were in the room, because this is typically the point of an event where you celebrate the hackathon results with a pizza. But here virtual pizza has to do. Yeah, I really hope that we will be able to conduct a similar format in one of our upcoming events. So probably not the one in June, that might be too early. But let's say something in the second half of the year.
It's in 2 weeks.
Yeah, if there are any, let's say, results you would like to share, like the current presentation, also what Gerald has shown 2 days ago, what was the structure of the hackathon, how did you find the cases and the companies and so on. It would be great if you could put this all together, let's say, in a presentation so that we can share it with all 2,000 participants.
Of course, yeah.
We can do that. Do good and spread the word. It's like in the Bible. And yeah, with this also brings us to the end of this session. I mean, unsurprisingly, there were not many questions related to the hackathon. It was more related to how could I join next time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will tell you next time how to join.
Yeah, how to open up that hackathon. Mm-hmm. This is an organizational challenge, but I'm sure you are up for it. That this could be interesting, yeah, especially if you go into certain verticals again.
The more the merrier. Yeah, looking forward to it. Also, if you want to, let's say, publish some of the results, feel free to use the channel, because this is the content we are here for. You know, this is interactive. So thanks a lot to all of you. And yeah, we will now come to the closing words of this of the AAIC 2021. So
thank you, guys.
Wish you a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Right, the closing words. Well, Clemens, I actually wanted to ask you what's your 2, or let's say 3. If you want to give 2, that's okay. But your main takeaways, learnings from this Applied AI conference, after seeing so many keynotes and discussions.
Yeah, I mean, one big fat disclaimer: this is not scripted, so it's not like
I didn't tell him that I will ask that.
Yeah, it's not like we're patting ourselves on the shoulder and say, "Oh, this was great. We had KPI 1, 2, 3, and this is gigantic."
This is also true, but
now when it comes to the main takeaways, I think it's very. I mean, it shows doing an event online is very good for the content. I think it would be very difficult to make such a content-driven format in an offline setting.